Please subscribe to this channel, so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 551. The worry on Li Yuran's mind. I'm no longer the Guan Qing Han I used to be. Rather, I'm a new individual. I'm no longer the daughter of the Guan family alone. Instead, I'm also the Jun family's daughter now. Moreover, I'm the sole daughter of the family. I'm born anew. I can groom myself again. I can choose a worthy man and get married if I wish to. And I can make my own decision in this regard now. An entirely new life awaited her in the future. However, Guan Qing Han's eyes were constantly looking out for someone in the crowd even during such an exciting moment. And she eventually found the one she was looking for. That handsome face was softly smiling towards her with a gentle expression in his eyes. Suddenly, she heard a feeble sound. It resembled a mosquito's buzzing. But it was extremely familiar to her. Qing Han. Guan Qing Han smiled with tears in her eyes, and softly sighed. Her face suddenly started to blush, and reddened as a result. But her heart was brimming with a sour feeling at the same time. There was a variety of mixed emotions in them. She didn't know whether she ought to laugh or cry. It was obvious that she was happy. However, tears were still flowing down her eyes in silence. It seemed as if she was finally parting from that nightmare of a day. The distinguished guests took their respective seats under Song Shang's guidance in an orderly manner, and waited for the wine party to begin. This was the same wine which the Jun family had previously auctioned for an extremely high price. Each table was provided with more than 10 jars of wine. This amount was sufficient to enjoy it. In fact, it was more than sufficient. The feast hadn't even begun. However, the strong smell of the alcohol had already set everyone's mouth in action. Jun Moxie was about to move forward when he saw a man approaching him with a smile on his face. This man then spoke up in a soft voice. "Third young Master Jun, could you spare some time? How about a small chat between us?" This man was tall, and had a handsome face. His expressions were gentle, and his gaze was cordial. Each of his movements was refined, elegant, and thoughtful. This man was the top talent of the capital city. He was the first son of the imperial tutor's lineage. And he had already been determined as the successor of the Li family Li Yuran. "Oh, a chat? A chat with you?" Jun Moxie faked a smile as he saw Li Yuran. He then titled his head at a crooked angle, and spoke. "Do you think there's any room for us to talk? Is there anything left to be talked about?" Li Yuran faintly smiled in response. His gaze remained fixed on Jun Moxie as he spoke. "Yes. There's much room for a talk. In fact, I believe that it's necessary for us to talk. Moreover, I'm convinced that the subject of our discussion would interest the third young master." Jun Moxie turned his head to look at this man. Then, he muttered, "Oh, you're so confident about it? Okay. Let's talk and satisfy this cherished desire of yours. I must say that having a chat with you doesn't make much sense under these circumstances. But it will probably be less boring than the people who've assembled here." Li Yuran forced a smile. "It seems this guy can even see that it's my cherished desire to have a conversation with him. It's fortunate my cherished desires are only limited to a conversations. It's very noisy in here. Follow me." Jun Moxie said with a mischievous smile. "I presume that you don't wish other people to hear what you talk to me about, right? Therefore, a quieter place will be more comfortable to have a chat." Li Yuran smiled and said, "Precisely. I'd like to keep the pleasure of disturbing the third young master to myself. Jun Moxie laughed out loud at first. Then, he turned around and began to walk while leading the way. Li Yuran tailed behind him and kept pace with him. They were strangers, but they resembled a pair of close friends as they walked while talking along. Jun Moxie had clearly sensed that the emperor had gazed at him from a distance when he had turned his head. The emperor's glance had been too distant to be scared of. However, those deep eyes had contained some incomprehensible emotions. Jun Moxie led Li Yuran a long way away. The two of them crossed a few hallways and arrived at the garden's pavilion. It was strange to hold a meeting in a garden at such a time of early winter. It could be presumed that this strange thing was happening for the first time in the Tangxiang city, quite possibly the entire Tianxiang Empire for that matter. A dense red cloud had covered the entire sky. The winds were biting cold. However, the pavilion was even windier since the cold breeze was rushing inside the pavilion from all directions. But it must be said that the area was bright and spacious. In fact, it was indeed an amazing place. Also, it was the most suitable place for catching a cold. However, Jun Moxie hadn't chosen this place because he wanted to neglect his guest. Instead, it was because there was no other suitable place to go. Numerous guests have arrived to congratulate us. And they've occupied the entire main hall and the lobby. Guanqing Han's courtyard is presently occupied by Mei Shuayan and her people. Therefore, these places aren't suited for Li Yuran. My courtyard is lodging Yi Gu Han and those two handicapped children. So, I can't take him there either. Furthermore, Silver City's Han Yen Meng and Mu Shue Tong have been hidden in Third Uncle's courtyard. Also, there are a large number of my soldiers standing guard there. So, that place is even more unsuitable. So, there's only place left my grandfather's study room. But, wouldn't I be giving him too much importance if I took him there? Jun Moxie thought about these things and decided to bring Li Yuran to the garden. Anyway, the two people's strengths were sufficient to prevent any cold or heat from bother them. Li Yuran looked around in astonishment. He then said, "The third young master's residence is genuinely worthy of his name. I can't think of any place in this wintry Tianxiang which can match this area." Jun Moxie laughed out loud. Then, he lifted his hand and offered Li Yuran a seat. But he didn't respond to Li Yuran's words. However, Li Yuran didn't sit down. Instead, he stood facing Jun Moxie and folded his hands behind his back. He seemed spellbound by the greenery around him. He began to talk, but it seemed as if he was muttering to himself. Jun Moxie, this ought to be our first formal conversation if my memory serves me right. Well, it is our first. Jun Moxie nodded as he sighed. It's a pity that I wasn't able to take the time out earlier. I genuinely couldn't. I'm 8 years older than you. You're only 18. And I started this year at 25. Li Yuran ignored young Master Jun's scornful joke. In fact, it appeared as if he was lost in his thoughts. His drooping eyebrows had made his loneliness evident. Third young Master Jun, are you aware how I've managed everything over these years? You don't know why I wish to talk about the issues I'm suppressing for such a long time. This has happened because I'm in front of you now. I know that we aren't great friends as of now. But I have a desire to tell these things to you. I hope third young master doesn't mind listening to me. Please treat it like a story. It's not a very brilliant story, but it's somewhat interesting. His smiled in self-deprecating manner as he waited for Jun Moxie to answer. These things have been in my heart for a very long time. It's unfortunate that I've never found a suitable situation or person whom I could confide in. However, I'm overwhelmed with emotions today, and I genuinely need to spit it out. I'm saying these things for the first time in my life. You've asked me to listen to you. We might be friends. But I'll be a good listener this once. Jun Moxie's face unexpectedly revealed a rare expression of seriousness and decency. He had felt the desolation of Li Yuran's heart. And that's why he wasn't able to prevent himself from sympathizing with the man. Li Yuran stood quietly for a while. It seemed as if he was adjusting the train of his thoughts and organizing them into a suitable manner of speech. Then, he slowly began to speak. I clearly remember everything. My memory has always been very good. I still remember that my grandfather took me from my mother's care when I was 3 years of age. He then announced that my mother had died long ago. He had done this because my mother hadn't been able to teach me anything in the time I had been in her care. I still remember that my mother had been very distressed. She had cried a lot. She had even begged my grandfather with her entire face being stained in tears. She had only begged him to let her have me for another year. However, my hard-hearted grandfather didn't agree to it. Though, he allowed her to meet me once a month. That was obviously the first profound memory I have of my mother. She was crying. Li Yuran closed his eyes as he blurted everything out. Then, he gave out a heavy sigh as his face showed rare traces of emotions. It appeared as if the turmoil in his mind was very forceful. He continued with his story after a while passed. But his voice had become steadier. My rich grandfather hired a Sky Xian expert for me when I was 3 years old. That expert was supposed to clean my meridians for a month so that it could lay down a firm Xian foundation for me. And I began to spend my days in cycles from that time onwards. I would have 6 hours of Xian practice. There would be 6 hours of education and etiquettes, and 4 hours of sword training. And the remaining time was allotted for eating and sleeping. Jun Moxie sighed softly. He didn't know what to say. These high-born people. They endure the kind of hardships and tempering which children from ordinary families don't even dream about in their teenage. And they're valued very highly by their elders if they are capable of enduring more. That is why they turn into extremely irascible individuals once they grow up into talented individuals. Some of them even become perverted. After all, their characters have been distorted since childhood. They're constantly kept under a lot of pressure. So, they need to release that pressure. That's why they often misuse authority if they're given some. And that's how they often turn into tyrants. In fact, many tyrants of the past have been shaped in a similar way. Many tyrants from history were talented and virtuous people before they obtained power. However, they became unimaginably violent and brutal after they got their hands on that power. I also wanted to play when I saw the other children at it. But they could, and I wasn't allowed to. My grandfather would beat me up if I slacked in any way. Moreover, the old man was 100 times more critical and strict with me than he was with my brothers, even more than that. Li Yuran was speaking softly. In fact, it seemed as if he was whispering. He would always tell me when I was a child, "You're different from others. That's why it's important for you to be capable of doing big things when you grow up." And I always kept this in mind. I eventually accept my high-ranking identity in the midst of countless beatings and criticism, the identity of an individual with an extremely high status. Li Yuran's expressions were tranquil. It appeared as if he was talking about someone else's life. I have to be calm and cultured at all times. I must never to speak loudly. I need to look calm and undisturbed even if I'm awfully angry. I must look comfortable even if I have a horrible ache in my body. In fact, I must make it look as if I'm enjoying myself. And that's because my grandfather told me that perseverance is the essence of success in life. My mother used to visit me for one day every month back then. Let me tell you that such days would be the happiest ones for me. Because I wouldn't lag behind in my tasks for that one day. And this stood true even if the tasks were the same as the day before. Even my supervisors and masters would leave. After all, my mother would accompany me to the practices, sword training, and etiquette's lectures. She would cook for me and stand quietly on a side to watch me practice. I used to wait for that one day every month. I would never dare to relax on the usual days. That's because my mother's face used to light up in surprise when she used to see my progress. She used to get so cheerful. She used to get so happy. And I would feel very happy whenever I saw her like that. Therefore, I wouldn't slack because I wanted to make her happy every month. Li Yuran shut his eyes tightly. His eyelashes were somewhat moist. Expressions of longing had appeared on his face. However, he was standing with his back towards Jun Moxie. Therefore, Jun Moxie couldn't see it. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 552. Atrocities can transform people in such a way. Almost everyone said that I was gifted because I was able to learn anything very quickly. But they didn't know why I was so quick. How could such a young child understand everything so fast? It was only because I longed for that one day with my mother. It was because I wanted to see her smile. I wanted to make her happier. This may be boring, but it was my only source of hope. However, this only lasted till I was 10 years of age. My grandfather had already begun to bring me in contact with tactics and trickery by that time. He had also begun to ask me about my opinions in different matter. He would hurl hate words of criticism at me if I said something inappropriate by any chance. One day, I went hunting with my guard. But I ran into my master there. I shot an arrow at an antelope, but it didn't die. Therefore, I rode my horse ahead and used my sword to kill it. I had somehow managed to control myself from exposing any emotions on my face. However, that was when I suddenly heard someone say, "He's very cold-blooded. He's make a great successor." And then, he appeared in front of me. However, he wasted no time after he saw me. He grabbed me and began to examine every joint in my body. He then asked me if I would like to accept him as my master. My bodyguard came to save me. However, that man didn't budge. Instead, he even waved his arm to throw my guards down. Then, he came to my family and said that he would like to accept me as his disciple. Li Yuran smiled bitterly as he continued to speak. That was when I got to know that he was the cold-blood great master Lei Wu Bei. He was unrivaled in the entire world. My grandfather immediately agreed to make me this man's disciple after he learned of this man's identity. But I didn't agree to it. And that's because I knew that I wouldn't be able to see my mother once I left with him. However, I was still forced to go with him. It had already been 2 years when I was first allowed to return home from my master's place. But I was extremely happy. Rather, I should say that I was ecstatic. After all, I was finally about to see my mother after 2 long years. I hardly rested while riding the horse back home. I managed to finish a 15-day journey in only 10. And that's because I had learned a lot of new things from my master. And I had progressed very quickly as well. After all, I was very excited to share this news with my mother. I wanted her to share the joy of my success. And I didn't wish to delay it for even a moment. I wanted to hug her, to let her hold me. I had always liked that feeling. But I couldn't see my mother anywhere when I returned home. I looked for her everywhere, but no one told me anything. Even my mother's maid was nowhere to be seen. So there was nothing that I could do about it. I only remember that I felt extremely horrible at that time. I'm making this confession for the first time in my life. I got hold of the Lee family's butler that night, and I asked him about my mother's whereabouts. He didn't agree to speak out at first. So I pulled out 10 fingernails from his hands, and his toenails after that. He eventually agreed to tell me everything. He told me that my mother was dead. Li Yuran began to shiver. It seemed as if his tall figure was rustling in the wind. 2 tears slowly oozed out of his eyes. Jun Moxie had been sitting calmly, and had been listening to him in silence. They were adversaries. However, a feeling of pity had suddenly arisen in his heart. My mother used to miss me terribly after I left my house. She dreamt of meeting me every day. She wept every day. She would always request my father to allow her see me once. Li Yuran's face had begun to distort. My father would always get irritated by this. So he eventually began to avoid her. However, my mother would find a way to see him, and she would then cry for me in front of him. They eventually had a huge fight one day. And my father, that piece of shit. That wretched piece of shit. He went as far as hurting her over something so small. He hadn't hit her badly, but my mother couldn't handle the injury. And she died after a few days. Only 2 months had passed since my mother's death by the time I got home. Tang Yuan's father wasn't the Minister of Revenue at that time. Instead, it was my father. He was trained in martial arts. But my mother wasn't. She was a frail woman. However, he had still acted in such an evil manner. Li Yuran clenched his teeth. However, Jun Moxie had clearly heard his voice squeak. Li Yuran continued to speak in a hoarse voice. "Third young master, what would you have done if you had been in my shoes? If I were you, what would I have done?" Jun Moxie genuinely pondered over it for a long time. But he couldn't help but force a smile and shake his head. The mother who gave him birth is on one side. However, the father is on the other. What could he have done? However, Jun Moxie still thought about it for a while in a calm manner. This was the first time that he had been so clueless. However, he was keen to know about it. So he couldn't help but ask, "What did you do?" "Third young master, it seems that you're not as good as me in this respect." Li Yuran spoke up with a bitter smile on his face. "People say that Jun family's third young master kills people like he's scathing flax. People say that being bloodthirsty is his second nature. But you're no match for me. After all, I'm devoid of humanity." He smiled cruelly, and his lips began to tremble. In fact, it appeared as if his teeth were also trembling. I grabbed him and killed him." Jun Moxie was left stunned upon hearing this. Li Yuran was a child of merely 12 years of age at that time. However, he went as far as to kill his own father. This is unimaginable. "Ha ha ha." Li Yuran sneered. "That was very unexpected, right? The first person I killed in my life was my own father." Li Yuran's body trembled. In fact, he began to shiver. It took him a long while to recover his tranquility. However, he sounded even more ruthless and cold now. That day changed me. It transformed me in my entirety. I became vicious and merciless. I had lost both my parents. And I was no longer deserving of anyone's care in this world. After all, I had killed my own father. So, why wouldn't I dare to kill anyone else I wanted to? You're very fierce. Jun Moxie knew that he couldn't have. After all, this wasn't fierce. Instead, it was inhuman. And Jun Moxie knew that couldn't have gone to such extremes if he had been in Li Yuran's shoes. A parent's love is deeper than the ocean which can submerge mountains. They might have made a mistake, but they are still your parents. They've created you. They've brought you up. Is it right to kill them with your own hands even if they've made a mistake? It's not surprising that Li Yuran's nature is so awfully twisted. His malicious nature can scare anyone. This matter had probably had a great effect on him. I picked up that blood-stained knife after that incident and went to look for my grandfather. I went to him and told him, I killed your son. Because he killed my mother. Li Yuran continued. My grandfather was expressionless for a long time. Then, he gave me his first order, kill anyone who might spread this matter. After that, I'll spread the word that your father suffered from an ailment and died because of it. I killed my father. But I killed 1,000 other men to be buried alongside him. That was when I got to know that my affairs didn't merely involve me alone. I realized that I won't be the only one blamed for my deeds. Rather, my actions would drag the entire Li family. Li Yuran had a bitter smile on his face. My grandfather beat me up ruthlessly after this incident. Then, he faced me and said, no matter what you do, don't ever have regrets. Jun Moxie breathed a deep sigh and thought, this Li Yuran is extremely vicious. However, Li Shang has given such an outrageous education to his grandson. This entire family is insane. It's natural for the mother to miss her son. But the husband didn't know how to comfort her, or maybe how to take care of her. Instead, he got troubled by it. So, he hit his wife and ended up hurting her badly. In fact, he hurt her so badly that she passed away. Then, the son came back and avenged his mother's death by killing the father. The grandfather found out that his son was killed by his own grandson. However, he went so far as to tell him, don't have regrets. The Li family's people are probably born with an unkind and cold nature. For example, Li Yuran's father beat his wife so badly that he injured her. And that too because they had a quarrel. And Li Yuran went one step ahead and killed his father with his own hands. This is so fecking absurd. People are so weak-willed. My grandfather didn't sleep for several nights after this matter. His hair turned white, and he started to develop wrinkles on his face. A few days passed. Then, he told me that it's fitting for my nature to be ruthless. Passion is important for success. But it is more important to be ruthless. Li Yuran laughed bitterly as he spoke. Jun Moxie was rendered speechless. It's not surprising that Li Yuran is capable of such treachery. After all, he had such a father. And such a grandfather. It seems like expecting him to teach his grandson to be generous and virtuous is nothing more than a mere fantasy. After that, I returned to Shanshang after another 3 years. However, Shanshang had suffered many hardships during that time. The people had no money to eat or buy clothes. They didn't even have the money to support their wives and parents. This was a major issue over there at that time. However, it was nothing for my Li family's financial power. My master slowly started favoring me more and more. Even my fellow disciples started feeling like they owed me and my family. It appeared as if Li Yuran was lost. But I wasn't happy. I wasn't happy at all. My grandfather had already declared me the future lord of the family by the time I returned home. So, I started living in my official residence and began handling the external business of my family. I started keeping extremely busy. However, the people of my family would remind me of my father whenever I saw them. They reminded me of that beast, that piece of shit. That's why I hated them. But I had power in my hands now. So, I began to give them a hard time and started taking them under my control. I would terrify them every time they'd come to me with their sufferings and problems. In fact, I would intimidate them until they wouldn't dare to speak. And I used to feel happy in doing this. That's how I realized that my happiness lay in this. Li Yuran grinned. That's why I began to love watching others suffer. I started to like controlling people. The more pain they were in, the happier I felt. In short, I liked to make other people cry. But there were days when I'd let them smile. I would make me feel like I could do anything. In fact, it was refreshing to do it once in a while. My hatred was only directed against the Li family at first. But I realized that other people's pain also gave me pleasure as time passed. What was even more surprising was that the Li family gradually began to prosper with each passing day after I brought those people under my control. The Li family began to come together in every aspect, regardless of whether it was business or bureaucracy. This outcome was far beyond my expectation. You brought the worms of your family under your control. So, the family was obviously going to prosper. Moreover, you had dared to terrorize your own brothers and cousins. So, who would dare to play sinister tricks on you? It would have been very strange if the Li family hadn't prospered after the bloodied methods you used. Jun Moxie secretly pondered. He had finally understood the matter. I get it. It must have happened like this. The main reason is that Li Yuran killed his own father. That must have led to the formation of an inner demon in his heart. And everything that has followed since then has been a cause and effect of this inner demon. The death of Li Yuran's mother became the turning point in his life. And that's the reason why Li Yuran is like this today. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 553. What if I were the emperor? However, one needs power to do these things. The more the power, the more pleasures one can have. Li Yuran's eyes flashed a cold light as he said, So, I started using the entirety of enthusiasm to study how I could get more power. My entire family gradually came under my control. But I soon realized that my family wasn't enough to satisfy my needs. And I wanted more power as a result. Therefore, I started to work harder and gradually began to suppress my opponents. And I slowly realized that my grandfather had spoken correctly. Li Yuran said. That same phrase. Jun Moxie asked out of curiosity. You need to be heartless if you wish to be successful. One needs to be merciless. Li Yuran's eyes flashed and he said, This is what my grandfather had said after I had killed my father. Therefore, I deliberately kept myself unattached from everything I did. I started to use perspective of a spectator. And I realized that it was particularly accurate. That's because I would need to eliminate anyone who'd stand in the way of my planning. I could even abandon my close relations if doing so would induce a big enough benefit. Li Yuran said darkly. After all, I won't be able to reach my goal on the odd occasion if I took my person's feelings into account. Moreover, not being able to reach my goal could also lead to a total failure. And it is easy to be left with nothing after one is defeated. Therefore, I can't be sentimental. You can't be sensitive. You must be heartless instead. You must be ruthless. Everyone in this world is merely a tool for my use. Li Yuran sneered. I can have whatever I want if I'm at the top of this world. I could even get back the things that I've lost out in the past. I could get the things that weren't even mine if I wanted to. I only need to be devoted to my cause. The current emperor is an excellent example of this. After all, Murong Xiu and Yi Gu Han were a perfect match. Their families were well matched in terms of social status. They had grown up together. They made an ideal couple. After all, their emotion for each other was deeply seated. However, the emperor wanted to have Murong Xiu. Therefore, Yi Gu Han's entire family was declared as traitors and eliminated between dawn and dusk. Then, Murong Xiu entered the emperor's palace and became the empress. This event is particularly inspirational for me. Li Yuran clenched his fist. This event had pushed you farther on the road of becoming a demon. But she doesn't love you in the first place. So, what will you accomplish even if you get her? Jun Moxie greatly disapproved of what Li Yuran had said. It's fine if she doesn't love me. But I would prefer that she frown and weep under my body than be happily groaning under another's. I will still be her man even if I can't have her heart. I will be better off than the man who can't even have her. Moreover, I believe that even her heart can be mine in the future if I'm willing to work hard. Li Yuran snorted and said in a savage manner. You are crazy. Jun Moxie puckered his brows and said, Li Yuran, you've been ruined. In fact, there's no turning back now. Why will I turn back? What will I get from turning back? In fact, I don't even have a road to turn back towards. But I still have a long road in front of me. Li Yuran smiled sarcastically. Suddenly, it seemed as if he had lost the strength of his entire body. Even his shoulders drooped. I've kept my silence for more than 10 years. I've never told this to anyone. However, I've said everything today. But I feel powerless. And my heart feels empty. I can't say if I'm happy or sad. I don't even feel the slightest bit of comfort. I've gone through my entire past in this short time. It feels that my heart is still submerged in this pool of depression. However, my heart no longer feels desolate because I have someone to talk to. Third Master Jun. Thanks for listening to me. I can't think of anyone else I could have talked to. Li Yuran finally turned around and slowly walked to the stone table. Then, he sat down and said in a serious manner, I feel very good now. Li Yuran's handsome-like face revealed a warm smile. It seemed sincere and warm. His mannerism had also reverted to their usually elegant and cultured state. You are welcome. You've made me understand many things as well. Everyone has a different mindset. I had never believed this aspect. But I do now. Jun Moxie's eyes were clear and bright as he looked at Li Yuran. However, looking at Li Yuran made him feel as if this man had gotten stuck so deeply in mud watery that he couldn't extricate himself. Li Yuran was a very smart and charming man. However, he doesn't feel as graceful and elegant to Jun Moxie as he had in the past. Instead, Jun Moxie somewhat pitied this man. Is this kind of a man also deserving of pity? Then, there's you, Jun Moxie. I had never considered you worth anything. I was swan flying high in the sky as far as I was concerned. However, you were merely a loach in the mud. I was exceptional. But you were nothing. Li Yuran chuckled and said, therefore, I had never paid attention to you. However, you've miraculously emerged like a hurricane in a short period of half a year. In fact, I wasn't even able to respond to this change since you had already gone too far above than me. I had considered you as a formidable life enemy when I had taken notice of your talents. Moreover, you had endured things for a long time before making your moves. So, I had even believed that your intrinsic nature was similar to mine. However, I don't think so anymore. Li Yuran faintly flashed a bitter smile and said, because I don't deserve to be your opponent anymore. The swan is beautiful, but it is nothing compared to the legendary bird that can soar to the ninth heaven. There's no comparison. Therefore, I'm only capable of having a conversation with you today. Jun Moxie smiled, but didn't speak. That's because this was already a publicly accepted fact. Third young master, do you know why I'm talking to you? Li Yuran laughed as he looked at Jun Moxie with some fascination. Hee. I think young Master Li is feeling gloomy and distressed. However, I don't believe that you're here to tell me these secrets alone. So, declare your real intentions. Jun Moxie raised his eyebrow as he said, I've been brought face to face with a new option of late. And this option might have a direct relation to my choices in the future. However, I'm not able to decide by myself. So, I've come to seek your opinion. Li Yuran spoke up in very serious and solemn manner. You're faced with a choice. And you've come to seek my opinion. Jun Moxie was stunned by this. So, he said, Li Yuran. Young Master Li, have you taken some unsuitable medicine? Yes. I must seek your opinion. And that's because you're involved in this matter. So, this is bound to play a vital role. The depths of Li Yuran's eyes suddenly became unfathomable. Shall we take a look at this situation? There's something that will link us. It could be considered a coincidence that my master recommended me to the great golden city. Then, Ma Jiangming came to the Li family 10 days ago. He wanted to meet me regarding this matter. He was happy after his examination. And this means that I can join the great golden city as long as I agree. This means that I will get a chance to witness the battle for seizing the heavens in a few years' time. Moreover, I might get an opportunity to participate in the next battle for seizing the heavens. In fact, I could even become a leading personality. Li Yuran's expressions were serious. The great golden city wants to select 10 youngsters this time. Jun Moxie, you may be the person who understands me the best. No other youngster will be able to beat me as long as I go. And that's because of the way I think and scheme. I genuinely believe this. Jun Moxie sincerely commented. I will consider this world's men to be monsters if a person with Li Yuran's intelligence and maliciousness doesn't succeed. However, his heart skipped a beat at the same time. So, this is the dilemma Li Yuran is faced with. It's not surprising that he's being so frank today. No wonder he's speaking so bluntly. It's no longer strange that he's acting so differently from how he used to be. Jun Moxie had finally understood the real reason behind Li Yuran's arrival. However, going away means that I must give up on the results I've worked so hard to achieve over the years. I must make a transition from desiring power in this secular world, and I must move to wanting the same at the topmost level. But I've invested so much energy and effort over the years, and I'm beginning to realize my goals. I hate this because I'm not very far from my heart's desires at this time. However, I will have to repeat this process if I decide to go there, Li Yuran slowly said. In fact, it seemed as he was raising his arguments. Jun Xie didn't say anything. Instead, he calmly waited for Li Yuran to speak up. Li Yuran remained silent for a while. Then, he suddenly lifted his head and looked directly at Jun Xie. He then said in a low voice, Jun Xie, would you oppose me if I wanted to become the emperor of Tianxiang Empire? Perhaps I should ask if I would be setting myself against you by doing so. I know that you don't desire power. In fact, you don't even care about it. You only care about your family. You're only concerned with your sentiments. And you only care about the people you love. Moreover, you desire absolute power and freedom. I'm confident that I haven't misjudged you in this regard. So, it doesn't matter who becomes the emperor. You won't care about it as long as he doesn't harm you. And I can swear that I will never be the Jun family's enemy. And this stands true regardless of whether I succeed or fail. In fact, I won't dare to be the Jun family's enemy. Li Yuran's eyes had turned very fervent at this moment. He fixed his eyes on Jun Xie and said, This has been the biggest dream that I've wanted to achieve in my life ahead. At first, I was confident that I would have many opportunities to be successful. But you have emerged now. And I have a strong intuition that I will suffer a heavy blow from you if I'm not careful. And I won't be able to withstand this setback when we consider the current strength of your Jun family. The Emperor of Tianxiang stands on the opposite side of the Jun family. Third young master, I also know a little about what's going on in your mind. Moreover, the three sons of the Emperor aren't getting along with you and Tang Yuan. So, I believe that you won't wish for any of them to become the Emperor of Tianxiang. Therefore, I will turn the great golden city's offer down as long as you give me a free hand. Instead, I will fight for Tianxiang's throne with everything I've got. Li Yuran's face lit up as he said, Third young master, maybe it will be a help to you if I choose to go this way. In fact, it will be good for you and for me. Your father Jun Wuhui was a great hero of his generation. He was an outstanding military general, and he had made a heroic contribution in Tianxiang's establishment. However, he had died under dubious circumstances. And I can't believe that third young master has no suspicions in his mind when it comes to this matter. Third young master, we may not be able to join hands. But we have a common enemy, and you don't want the secular power. So, you might as well help me. What's the harm in it? After all, I still know how to judge the hour and take stock of the situation at hand. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 554. I'll give you a big gift. Jun Xie had been listening to him without saying a word. His tightened brows had made it evident that he had been pondering over things. Li Yuran had gotten emotional a while ago. So, he inhaled 2 deep breaths and calmed himself down. Then, he began to blurt it out in a single breath. This is where I choose to belong. A great man can't do without authority. And this Li Yuran will have no fears if third young master gives me a nod. Jun Xie said with a smile, Do I have such influence now? Yes, you do. You aren't even aware of how frightening your influence has become. However, Tianxiang's current situation is fairly evident. The Tianxiang Empire won't survive one day if Jun Xie wants its destruction. Even the overnight assassination of the entire royal family is merely a whim away for someone like you. However, you're still worried about your family's feelings. Moreover, you don't have any conclusive evidence to take this brazen decision. Li Yuran clenched his teeth and said, I'll probably have to go to the Great Golden City if Third Young Master is unable to determine his standpoint. So, it must be said that there stands an opportunity for Third Young Master's enemies if he can't make a commitment. After all, this Yuran will have to put his own safety first. Li Yuran smiled warmly as he said those words. He had been extremely calm when he had kept his two alternatives in front of Jun Moxie. Jun Moxie suddenly stood up. He took 2 steps with his hands behind his back. His brows were twitched into a frown. Li Yuran had opened up about things. And Jun Moxie was convinced that Li Yuran had spoken from his heart. However, Jun Moxie couldn't feel relieved even though he believed it to be true. Li Yuran might have spoken from his heart at this time. However, a man of his nature would heartlessly turn hostile in case of a conflict of interests were to arise in the future. And that's because Li Yuran's disposition would entail him to do so. Therefore, Jun Moxie couldn't be convinced of Li Yuran's commitment of never opposing the Jun family. Not even a little. There was another reason. Li Yuran had great ambitions, amazing capabilities, and outstanding tactics. However, Jun Moxie didn't consider his characteristics suited to rule an empire. Li Yuran is in the embryonic form of becoming a minister of the state. He's probably the best candidate for a state minister's position. However, he isn't suitable to be the monarch of an empire. You probably see me at a very influential position at this time. Jun Moxie wrinkled his eyebrows as he spoke. Li Yuran, you've made an honest confession today. That's why I'll also be truthful to you. You aren't suited to be a monarch. You should be under 1 person, but above a 10,000. In fact, that would be the best position for you. But you still lack too much if it's about ruling the entire world. So, that means the Third Young Master doesn't accept my proposal? Li Yuran was somewhat disappointed at first. He then spoke up in a sharp voice. But why? Why do you think I'm unfit to rule the empire? You say this, my grandfather also says this. Haha. Don't tell me you that believe Yang Huayu's 3 useless sons are more skilled than me. They can have a chance to hold the emperor's title. So, why can't I try? You can't. And that's because you lack the aggression and dominance. Moreover, this is something which comes from within. In fact, you lack by too many measures when it comes to this aspect. You lack too much to harbor such illusions. However, the most important point is that you've always thought about your own self only. You'll become the most influential minister of your generation if you sincerely seek to assist a monarch. You would ascend to an extremely important position. In fact, you would probably leave your name in the history books. The future generations will talk about you for years. And they will study your methods for eons to come. You'll make any country rich and powerful in no time. However, your traits will fall short if you wish to make decisions for a country. Jun Moxie faced his competitor of old times and announced these words in a serious manner. Oh, what a coincidence. My grandfather also speaks in this way. He used to say that I would protect the Li family's foundation if I were to become a minister. He says that I won't let the family crumble. But a calamity is inevitable if became the ruler. And that would lead to the destruction of the entire family. Your manner of speaking is similar to his. Li Yuran's face had expressions of dejection. In fact, it appeared as if a cock had been defeated in a match. However, his complexion suddenly began to turn sinister. Are you telling me that I Li Yuran will have to live under another man for my entire lifetime? I'm not willing to do that. You keep blabbering about your grandfather. The truth is that you've been shaped under his commands throughout your life. You've always been under him. But you don't find any problems in accepting that. Jun Moxie spoke intensely. You're beneath the emperor when you act as a minister in the imperial halls. You're beneath your grandfather at home. You're second to me among your peers. However, you're known as the most talented man of your generation outside. But you don't seem bothered by that. Moreover, you've lived like this for so many years. In fact, I'm sure that you would have continued to live like this for the rest of your life if your master hadn't recommended you to the great golden city. You would have lived like this till the day you died. So, it's unlikely that you'll be able to realize these wildly ambitious dreams of yours by yourself. Moreover, your heart knows whether these words of mine are right or wrong. You're trying to compel me to make a commitment. But this is merely a means to prove your grandfather wrong, isn't it? Moreover, I genuinely don't like you. In fact, I've never liked you. But I don't wish to deceive you today since you've been honest with me. Jun Moxie continued. Li Yuran. Let's call it a day. All right. Oh. So, do you have another candidate on your mind for the emperor's position? Li Yuran remained silent for a while. Then, a strand of his hair dropped down on his fair face. He then suddenly raised his head and looked on sharply. Is it Yang Mo? He didn't wait for Jun Moxie to answer. Instead, he smiled and began speaking. No wonder you had invited Yang Mo to join the aristocratic hall. No wonder you've always given him the responsibility of dealing with the royal households when they visit. So, you've been training him. You've been training and nurturing him this entire time. Li Yuran had a cold smile on his face. He was disappointed. In fact, he was feeling awfully despaired. I'm convinced that you're too scared to mess with him. Jun Moxie smiled coldly. He didn't deny it in its entirety. After all, he knew that a person with Li Yuran's nature could easily make Yang Mo fall from grace in case Jun Moxie accepted this openly. However, this would keep him under doubt. Therefore, it was better if he didn't deny it and kept Li Yuran under a doubt instead. And that's because Li Yuran would hesitate in making a move. Moreover, the manner in which Jun Moxie had made this statement had made it appear like a naked threat. Yes. That's right. I won't dare to mess with him. Moreover, I won't dare to make any moves in Tianxiang City either. Li Yuran laughed. However, I will choose to go to the Great Golden City in this case. And I will dare to make a move once I have enough strength. So, I'll come back when I have enough strength. Things may not be the same by the time you return. You may even realize that you still don't know much about the high-level mysterious ways of this world. The world isn't only about power. Jun Moxie had stated this in a pensive tone. I'll certainly be your enemy once I go to the Great Golden City. Li Yuran looked at Jun Moxie. I'm certain about this matter since you have a connection with the TNFA. No. You won't. You won't get to decide anything in this manner. Jun Moxie sneered. You are a smart man. You could have done anything before I had risen to power. However, you won't dare to do anything since I'm now a powerful man. In fact, you won't dare to become my enemy as long as I Jun Moxie don't die. However, I also know that you'll be the first one to go against the Jun family once I'm dead. Third young master knows me too well. Li Yuran was at ease. He said with a smile. I'm clever. And my methods are shrewd. But I've always had this shortcoming of being overcautious. And this is why you're not fit to be the ruler. Jun Moxie said indifferently. But I won't give up. I will never give up. After all, one can conquer the heavens if one makes great efforts. Li Yuran stood up. Jun Moxie, I'll take my leave. I'm likely to depart for the great golden city in 3 days' time. But I wish to see you again someday. Perhaps someday in the far future. You've been honest in saying that you've never liked me. And it's the same for me. I've never liked you either. You've always been a rival to me. I've never thought of making friends with you. In fact, I never thought that I would have such a conversation with you. However, I would still like to give you some words of advice before I leave. What is it? What advice? Jun Moxie lifted his eyebrows. He seemed interested in hearing this. Be careful over the next few days. It's important for you to be very careful. Li Yuran stated this with a smile. Treat this as a small reward from my side. I know that you didn't comply with any of my requests. And you didn't make any commitments to me either. But you listened to my story with patience. Besides, I don't want you to die at someone else's hands. After all, I'll keep wishing how happy I would have been if I had killed Jun Moxie with my bare hands. Keep dreaming about it. But be convinced that you won't have this opportunity in this life. Jun Moxie gazed at him as he stood up. I've been a hypocrite for most of my life. And you've been a debauchee for the most of yours. However, the survivor will get very lonely if one of us dies. So, it's okay if I'm unable to fulfill this cherished desire of mine. We can't be friends in this life. But you'll always be a motivation for me. Li Yuran smiled. And his complexion returned to his usual one. Third young master. Goodbye. He cupped his hands in order to bid goodbye. Then, he left without looking back. He hadn't been able to fulfill his purpose today. His requests to Jun Moxie had also ended in disappointment. However, he had been able to let go of his anger and dejection. So much so that he had even tried to warn Jun Moxie before he had left. Jun Moxie slowly sat down. Li Yuran's words had some meaning in them. In fact, it seems that the people from the 3 Holy Lands have already arrived. Moreover, they're probably planning to launch an attack on the Jun family. The words spoken by Li Yuran as a gift can't be meaningless. They aren't meaningless in any way. You've always looked down upon the Li family's people, but you're still worried about them. You admire being ruthless and heartless, but you're still an emotional man. After all, humans will always be human. So, how can you genuinely be so ruthless? Jun Moxie saw Li Yuran's figure disappearing into the corner of the room as he whispered these words to himself. Li Yuran had given the gift of these words right before he was scheduled to leave for the Great Golden City. He hadn't done this to look good in Jun Moxie's eyes. He hadn't even done to reward Jun Moxie for listening to his story. Instead, he wasn't very optimistic about the royal family of Tianxiang. Moreover, he knew that Tianxiang would witness a change of dynasties within a single day in case Jun Moxie made a move. Therefore, Li Yuran had given away this secret in order to ensure the Li family's survival. He had divulged this secret with only one desire: go easy on the Li family when you make the move. Li Yuran was indeed a very intelligent man. He genuinely deserved his fame for being the most talented youngster in Tianxiang. After all, he knew when to advance and when to fall back. Li Yuran even understood Jun Moxie's way of thinking. However, he had still chosen to divulge this secret. Moreover, he had done that without making any threats, demands, exchanges, or conditions. And it was probably because he knew that he couldn't afford to provoke Jun Moxie at this time. Moreover, he knew that he would receive nothing in return in case he put forth some conditions. That's why it was better to give it up in this manner. Jun Moxie shook his head and sighed. Jun Moxie knew that he would have gone after Li Yuran in case he had dared to offend him by saying something impertinent. In fact, Jun Moxie wouldn't have hesitated in killing him on the spot. However, Li Yuran had acted very cleverly today. And he hadn't given Jun Moxie any reasons to feel offended. Or was it possible that Jun Moxie appreciated him to some extent? After all, would Jun Moxie need a reason in case he wanted to kill someone? Gusts of wind rose in the sky, and snowflakes fluttered down on his face. Their incisive iciness seeped into the bottom of his heart. This was the first snowfall of this winter. However, it had poured down very quietly on this day. Did this bear an indication to something? Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 555. A great enemy arrives at the doorstep. Lei Wubei and Shi Changxiao didn't leave in the evening. Instead, they stayed at the Jun residence. The host obviously can't force a guest to leave if they don't leave on their own accord. And this was especially the case if the guest happened to hold the majestic status of a great master. However, Old Man Jun and others couldn't prevent themselves from feeling somewhat strange about this. After all, even the arrival of these two men had come as a surprise to them. Therefore, it was obviously weirder that they had decided to stay back. Meanwhile, Feng Wanyun had lodged with the solitary falcon. The sounds of the wind had been becoming softer since afternoon. In fact, they had gradually faded away. And the world had fallen into silence, only the silvery white snowflakes had been falling relentlessly in a dreamy manner. In fact, there was already a thick layer of it on the ground, trees, and the roof. The lands had been dyed a hazy white by the snow. Indistinct silhouettes of several men came into appearance in the silence of midnight. Over 100 figures quietly surrounded the Jun residence in this heavy snow. Everyone's body movements were very quick and skillful. In fact, they were moving like the wind. Dozens of black-robed men had stationed themselves on the Jun residence's fence in the twinkling of an eye. The Jun family's guards were patrolling below the fence. However, these men were so skilled that the guards didn't notice their presence even when they were standing right above their heads. 7 or 8 figures were flying high in the sky in the distance. Their bodily movements made it seem as if they were lighter than the snowflakes. They were floating in a leisurely and carefree manner. Mei Shuayan frowned whilst she lay on her bed within the elegant fragrance courtyard's premises. She suddenly sat up. Then, her body flashed, and she quickly got dressed. She then flicked a small piece of paper out of the window. However, this piece of paper suddenly changed its direction in midair and entered the Snake King's room. Then, Mei Shuayan's body moved and arrived in front of the window. She attentively looked outside and saw that countless black-robed individuals were gently floating down with the snowflakes under the brightly gleaming moonlight. A murderous spark flickered in Mei Shuayan's eyes. Her face turned as cold as ice. She abruptly opened the door and floated out in silence. Her delicate, fair, and graceful figure seemed like that of a fairy as she moved in the sky. She went straight upwards and rose dozens of feet in the air. Then, she steadily stationed herself on the top of the Jun family's tower. She then shouted in a cold voice. 3 holy lands, have you genuinely stooped so low? You have arrived to do something as shameful as launching an attack on a secular family? You've genuinely left me to sneer at you. Meanwhile, Mei Shuaiyan's astonishing momentum frantically rushed around like a wave that surges violently across the ocean. And the entire courtyard of the Jun residence was shrouded by her aura in a couple of breaths. It seemed as if a dry lake had run into a mighty sea. The violent sea waves had poured and filled the lake to capacity. Moreover, the waves didn't seem to be showing any signs of stopping. This momentum was as majestic as the one witnessed when several mighty rivers converge. Moreover, it seemed as if that scene was being accompanied by innumerable strikes of thunder and lightning. And that thunder was ruthlessly causing havoc in the entire sky. Mei Shuaiyan's snow-white robes surpassed the snowfall's beauty as she stood atop the tall tower in the snow. Her long hair was flowing like a waterfall as her graceful body stood proudly upright. Her breathtaking face was sufficient to amaze any man. However, it was emitting a cold look of bitter disappointment. Her imposing aura had lifted a layer of snow off the ground. And the snow had then started to swirl around her body. Mei Shuaiyan looked like a fairy at this moment. But this fairy was exuding an earth-shaking murderous intention. Mei Shuaiyan had been genuinely enraged at this time. She had been graceful and elegant in the face of the 3 holy lands' despicable actions since she had always given priority to the overall situation. However, she had finally exposed her murderous intention. This was unadulterated murderous intention. In fact, it seemed like the murderous intent of an individual who'd feel gloomy if they weren't allowed to kill. Whoosh! 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 A series of cloth-ripping sounds echoed as numerous robes moved at high speeds. Mei Shuaiyan secretly counted the numbers. There were 90 individuals in total. They rushed over from all directions and gathered below the tower. However, they had no choice but to gather there. Each of these individuals was a top expert. Their leaders were outstanding, experienced, and careful. Therefore, they had quickly judged that their weaker comrades wouldn't be able to withstand her blows in case they were to stand at a distance from each other. Moreover, they had figured that many of their team's members would be fated for death since the woman atop the tower was likely to attack very decisively. In fact, they had realized that they wouldn't even get the time to rescue their comrades. These 90 top experts from the 3 holy lands had been forced to change their wishful thinking under Mei Shuaiyan's highly oppressive and tyrannical momentum. And they had been forced to assemble close to each other instead. That's because they had realized that Mei Shuaiyan was unlikely to be lenient in case they allowed her to attack them one individual at a time. Only one individual's ferocious and oppressive aura had left 90 renowned top experts terrified. This itself was enough to state that Mei Shuaiyan's power was world-shaking. Numerous other momentums also stirred up and surged towards the sky in response. The dense snow suddenly rose upwards into the sky in a split second. It seemed as if an invisible dome had been formed over the Jun family's courtyard to block the snow outside. The momentum was suddenly reversed in a very violent manner. And Mei Shuaiyan's robes started to flutter with rustling and droning sounds. We are from the 3 holy lands. But an evil creature like you can't criticize us. After all, we've done a lot for the peace and growth of the entire mainland. What would you know about it? A strange and ear-piercing voice echoed. This disgusting voice was like the sound of a rat grinding his teeth at night. Or like an owl screeching on a grave. It seemed like the gates of the hell had opened, and wailing of the malicious spirits therein had rushed out. In short, this voice was extremely unpleasant to the ears. A man floated out from the crowd as this voice echoed. That's right. He floated out because his legs didn't even move. In fact, his entire body hadn't shown any signs of movement. He had simply floated out like a ghost. This man's unkempt hair reflected in the clear snow below. His facial features were withered, and his cheeks had sunk deep inwards. One of his eyes was emitting a cold light from its very depths. However, other eye, there was only a hole in the eye socket. Just a dark hole. It could be seen that the left-hand sleeve of his robe had fluttered when he had floated forward. So, it was evident that there was no arm in that sleeve. Moreover, one of the trouser legs was also empty. This indicated that one of his legs was also missing. A careful glance at this man's head would leave one to discover that he only had one ear. He stood there looking remarkably similar to a zombie that had jumped out from a grave. He even carried that dense and eerie aura on his body. This man had serious disabilities. Mei Shuaiyan's expressions changed. It turned out that she had recognized this man. The reason why she recognized him was, he had led the group which had besieged her in the past. This man was surnamed Yu. His original name was Yu Sheng. In fact, it was a good name since it meant, I will be triumphant over my enemies. But he got disabled after he suffered a major defeat in the past. Moreover, only half of his body was lucky enough to survive that incident. Thereupon, he got the nickname of Yu Ban, or half-bodied. However, he didn't pay any attention to it. He earned himself a lot of fame in his half-bodied avatar as time passed. So, people eventually stopped calling him Yu Sheng altogether. This man's name was somewhat funny, but he wasn't. His usual habit was to divide his enemies into half. And this didn't refer to their properties either. He would cleave their bodies into halves. After all, only a half-bodied could meet a half-bodied. This man was extremely powerful even though he was disabled. He also commanded a very high status. In fact, he was the chief of operations in the elusive land of immortals. He had a decisive and violent heart, and had a reputation for acting mercilessly. His Xian strength was quite outstanding, and it was rare to find someone in his generation who could match him. In fact, it could be said that Mei Shuaiyan wouldn't have suffered those serious injuries if this man hadn't used his entire strength when he had led that ambush against her in the past. It was a coincidence that he was leading the team this time as well. In fact, this seemed as if these two were destined to clash against each other. He raised his gloomy head, and a grim light glowed in his only eye. He looked at Mei Shuaiyan, and puckered his eyebrows. Then, he suddenly laughed and said, "A little girl shouldn't speak so loudly when standing at such height. After all, the wind might get your tongue because you're standing so high up." Mei Shuaiyan was condescendingly looked him in a cold manner. Then, she stated in a heavy voice, "Retreat." She had only spoken one word, but it had sounded as if a muffled thunderstrike had suddenly exploded. Even the ground was left to shake a few times. And the snow on top of the trees within a radius of 30 meters fell down with a rustling sound. The minds of 90 men who stood in the courtyard were left stunned by this. They had known that there was a top expert in the Jun family. However, they hadn't foreseen that this individual would be so strong. The strengths of these 90 people from the three holy lands had already reached the top levels. However, none amongst them could match her. However, they were fearless. Even the weakest amongst them had reached the basic realm of the Great Master level. Moreover, their team consisted of 30 experts who were above the Great Master level, 10 experts from each of the three holy lands. After all, they had joined hands this time. In fact, this could be considered the most powerful collaboration of the three Holy Lands over past hundreds of years. 60 Great Master level experts and 30 experts above the Great Master level. It would have been a joke if they had gotten intimidated by the enemy. The woman in front of them possessed astonishing Xian strength. But even a fierce tiger can't resist a pack of wolves. Hadn't Venerable Mei of Tian Fa Forest been exceptionally tyrannical back in the day? Hadn't his tyranny been unmatched? However, 10 top experts had still managed to defeat him after they had joined hands. In fact, the famed Venerable Mei had barely managed to escape at that time. Therefore, they didn't have any reason to be afraid of this lone young woman. Little girl, you are merely talking bullshit from a position of height. But don't ask us to leave for no reason. In fact, you ought to come down and take a look at the real situation if you have the ability. Others will only listen to you if you have a very big fist. Half-bodied squinted his only eye as he said in a shady and pitiful manner. A scholarly and elegant man was standing beside him. This scholarly man was none other than Ning Wuqing. Another man who looked like an immortal stood behind them. His facial features were so lean that it seemed as if someone had carved them out with a knife. He had a white beard and white hair. Moreover, he seemed as calm and unflustered as a mountain. 7 other men were arranged behind them in a wing-like pattern. Furthermore, 20 more men were arranged in their background in 2 neat rows. So, it was evident that this lineup hailed from the elusive land of immortals. Mei Shuayan condescendingly watched their battle formation with a cold expression in her eyes. And she couldn't help herself from breathing a heavy sigh. This was an exquisite battle formation. These people could advance to attack and retreat in defense whenever needed. Moreover, this was a group of experienced experts. So, they modified this battle formation in the wink of an eye. It could be assessed that these men had a high degree of tacit understanding. And this understanding had evidently been developed from rehearsing for the battle for seizing the heavens. It must be mentioned that this understanding had been formed in order to deal with the outsiders. However, they were using it on their own allies at this time. The sorrow of situation was perhaps hard to express. There was another team on the left-hand side. They too comprised of roughly the same number of people. However, it was shocking to see that even Ma Jiangming was standing in the second spot amidst this team from the Great Golden City. Purple-robed men stood upright on the right side of the team from the elusive world of immortals. Their fearlessness was visible from the gleam in their eyes. These people hailed from the illusory ocean of blood. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 556. Prepared for a war. No one among them was mediocre. This terrific lineup had made it evident that their strengths had already reached the extremes. In fact, it was hard to guess how many folds their strengths surpassed the Jun family's power by. It wouldn't be wrong to say that there would have been no need for the dispatch of 90 such experts over this task if these people hadn't taken Mei Shuayan into account. Perhaps only 10 of them would have been sufficient for the entire Jun family's destruction. How could the Jun family have coped with this crisis of destruction? There was no hope for the Jun family as far as the current situation was concerned. They could only drag a few people with them at the most. In fact, they couldn't even drag the enemy's leading personalities down with themselves if they tried. The difference in the strengths of the two parties involved was beyond comparison. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that this gap was as huge as the one between the heaven and earth. After all, this gap was impossible to overcome. Mei Shuayan had gasped at the sight of the preparations the three Holy Lands had made for the battle for seizing the heavens. However, she still needed to overlook it for now. She gave out a sneering laugh. Then, her body suddenly rose in the air like flash of lightning. She was too quick for others to take note of how and when she had moved. She landed on the ground in front of the half-bodied and spoke up in a cold tone. Half-bodied, I've come like you had asked. So, tell me, how can I help you? No one could make out what was going on inside Mei Shuaiyan's mind by merely looking her beautiful face. She looked as calm and unperturbed as always. However, she was extremely anxious in reality. The reason why she had made a loud noise before coming down was to toil for a little more time. After all, some people from the Jun family might get a chance to escape if luck favored them. And they could find an opportunity to make a comeback as long as some of them survived. Of course, Mei Shuaiyan was mainly concerned about him being able to escape. In fact, Mei Shuaiyan would harbor no regrets even if she died today as long as he was able to escape. I hope that Snake King, Tiger King, and Jun Moxie understand my intentions. I hope they don't waste the sacrifice of my life. They will be able to rise in time as long as they don't run into any mishaps. This was a time of urgency. So, it was too late to come up with any plans. Therefore, Mei Shuaiyan was only hoping that she'd ascend to the heavens. Girl, you've probably understood our intentions by now. Half-bodied spoke up in a gentle manner. A girl who possesses such a supernatural cultivation must know about the battle for seizing the heavens. We believe that the outcome of the battle for seizing the heavens depends upon the magical abilities of those mysterious pills from the Jun family. And we swear that we won't harm the Jun family for the purpose of the mainland's safety and the welfare of its common people. However, this stands true only as long as the girl and the Jun family hand over those divine pills. We'll also need the alchemist who refines them. In fact, we will withdraw from here right this instant if you do that. What do you think about this? This matter is now left for the girl to decide upon. This is my way of showing respect to you and the Jun family. Is that so now? You care about the welfare of the common people? That's a nice pretense to fool everyone. It's a pity that these words aren't the real reason behind these shameless actions of yours. Mei Shuaiyan continued to speak contemptuously. You're trying to cover up how trashy the people from the three holy lands have become. Other people might not know it. But do you think that I don't know it? Be straightforward if you want those mysterious pills. And say that you're greedy. What's the point of being pretentious about it? What's the connection between your greed and the welfare of the world? This girl is very quick-witted. I think I admire her. Someone from the illusory ocean of blood side spoke out. Then, a middle-aged man leisurely stepped forward and spoke up. Listening to this girl's words makes it seem as if she knows a lot about our three holy lands. It's agreeable that we haven't come here with generous intentions. But it would be wrong to say that we've only come for our personal interests. You know that we the three holy lands have come here for our selfish reasons. But you also know that the common people will be the ones to benefit out of this. In fact, no one can declare this as untrue. You seem acquainted with the tales of the continent. So, you must understand that one mustn't care about the sacrifices if they wish to succeed in something big. The monarch of a nation also works in the same manner. However, we are trying to work for an even greater good in comparison to a petty monarch. The man had spoken justly and sensibly. His words had been very reasonable. Even Mei Shuaiyan found it somewhat difficult to contradict him. So, she carefully looked at this man's appearance. She saw that this man had delicate features, a perfect build, a sturdy and tall body, and an upright figure. He was wearing a tidy purple gown. And his gown was glamorously flashing in the snow. 5 golden lines were shining on the cuffs and collar of his gown. He continued with a graceful smile. Besides, my illusory ocean of blood has come to the Jun family to talk about another important matter as well. The Jun family has killed 2 of our great master-level experts in the days gone by. Moreover, they've also killed the sun which scorches 1,000 mountains, Huang Taiyang. They were killed by the Jun family's conspiracy. Those 3 had gone through several years of hard training in order to qualify to fight in the battle for seizing the heavens. You can't say that this matter isn't one of importance. In fact, it doesn't even matter who started the fight anymore, you need to give us an explanation. Else, I'm sure that this is going to harm our friendship. His tone had been gentle, but he had gotten straight to point. Anyone who'd listened to him would notice a threat concealed in his words. Mei Shuayan calmly looked at this cultured and elegant face. This man looked only 30 or 40. However, she was aware that this man was probably 7 or 8 times older than 30. Zi Jinghong, there's no reason for you to speak so shamelessly. It doesn't matter what topic you're talking about, this shameless behavior is still disgraceful. Mei Shuayan coldly said, don't tell me that the reason behind Huang Taiyang's death isn't overly obvious. Then, you even went ahead and said that it doesn't matter who might have started the fight. You've made me look down upon the illusory ocean of blood by saying that. This man was known as Zi Jinghong. And he had a loud and resounding title, the purple cloud that arrives from the east. His sword technique could summon the thunderous purple clouds from the east. And their appearance was never a good omen for the other side. He was ranked 3rd in the illusory ocean of blood. His swordplay was as good as Ning Wuqing's. A single slap of his palm had the power to crack mountains and slit through the stones. Even Mei Shuayan couldn't have expected that he would have personally arrived for this task. In fact, his appearance had made it evident that the illusory ocean of blood had given a lot of importance to this matter. Moreover, it won't be wrong to say that his arrival was a clear sign that they wouldn't have second thoughts about killing anyone who stood in their path. Well, it makes no difference whether you look down upon or not. Girl, do you genuinely believe that you'll be able to walk away tonight? This man seemed to be leading the Great Golden City's platoon. He was wearing a long hemp gown. He also had a crown on top of his head. 3 pearls were embedded in it. It seemed as if some country's emperor had decided to join in. Xiao Wei Cheng. On what basis are you qualified to say such words? Mei Shuayan retorted with a cold expression. Does that 3-pearled crown from the Great Golden City give you the audacity to speak in this manner? Xiao Wei Cheng burst into a loud laughter. He then waved his hand and shouted, everyone, begin ambushing this vixen. Ma Jiangming flashed a strange smile. His face was overcast with lightning clouds of sorrow. It appeared as if he harbored endless desires to commit murder. He was also the first one to dash out for the task amidst the crowd. Moreover, his eyes were emitting rays of hatred and resentment. How on earth could Ma Jiangming admit defeat, especially in front of an attractive woman? After all, they weren't very pleasing to his eyes. His face didn't look his age. And his smile wasn't revealing his true intention. He was an embodiment of the saying, even smiles have dagger hidden within. Mei Shuayan was about to move into action when another delicate and womanly figure suddenly appeared from behind with a hissing sound. A green shadow spread over the entire sky in a flash of lightning. Then, it got entangled with Mei Shuayan's dazzling white aura. The 2 people spun rapidly, and their shadows seemingly fused into one. It became difficult to differentiate one from the other. Only 2 shadows of light could be seen rummaging over each other. They were turning and twisting while moving up and down at a great speed. They spun around in the vacant sky while scattering the snow around them. It was the Snake King Green Hunter. Mei Shuayan had suddenly gotten worried since the Snake King hadn't escaped. What about the rest of them? Are they also still here? Two sturdy and tall figures hurried towards her from the left side as this thought crossed her mind. The eyes of these two men were filled with hatred. And they were hurling abuses as they were walking. In fact, they were cursing in a very loud voice. It wasn't very pleasant to hear them. They were Bear King and Earth Cracker. Two others were rushing towards her from the right. However, they looked extremely skillful and agile. They were silent, but their complexions were grim. Their long hair was fluttering in the breeze. These two men were Solitary Falcon and Feng Wanyun. Two more individuals were walking towards Mei Shuayan from the back. They had grave expressions on their faces, and they were walking at a slow pace. These two men were Jun Xie and Jun Wuyi. The duo had expressions of worry on their faces, but they didn't seem in a hurry. Mei Shuayan felt so anxious that she nearly got sick. In fact, she was sweating all over. Oh heavens! Why haven't they left? Why have they come to confront an enemy that possesses such an overwhelming power? Don't they know that confronting them is tantamount to asking for death? What are these people doing when they know that they'll die? These are times when even a great hero would run to the Green Hills so that he can make a comeback when the time is suitable. Mei Shuayan couldn't comprehend the mindset of this Jun father and son duo. After all, the enemy was far stronger than their own self. Jun family was already on the edge of life and death. However, these two men had remained unyielding. How can we let our guests face these enemies? We know that we might die. But we'll die before our guests do. After all, this is the Jun family's residence. The Jun family will be able to recover as long as Jun Moxie lives on. Today's bloodshed will give rise to an ocean of hatred. But they'll be able to make a comeback in time. The Solitary Falcon had showed up for the Jun family. I haven't used much of my strength to aid the Jun family ever since I've arrived here. However, I've repeatedly received huge favors from them. The Solitary Falcon was very grateful to the Jun family. How will I ever be able to compensate such a huge favor? Therefore, the Solitary Falcon rushed out without hesitation as soon as the enemy invaded. However, a series of complicated thoughts were tumbling inside Feng Junyun's mind at this time. I had abandoned this family when they had gotten into trouble in the southern Heaven City. Would I escape again? What am I? Am I an ostrich that I'd keep hiding from dangers like that? I know that the enemy is as strong as I am. In fact, many amongst their ranks are much stronger than me. But when would a real hot-blooded man show off his strength if not now? I will die fighting if that's what this decision will bring me to. Then, Feng Wanyun had also rushed along with Solitary Falcon. Arg! The 300 soul devourers and heavenly destroyers from Jun Moxie's personal team also showed up at the courtyard's perimeter with thunderous roars. Every soldier had a cold expression and anger on his face. They held the Xian tendon crossbows in their left hands. And they held sharp swords in their right. Their entire body was emitting a murderous aura. They then gradually began to spread in a circle with vicious expressions of their faces. The soul devourers and heavenly destroyers were merely basic-level Jade Xian fighters. So, they were like tiny ants in front of these great master-level experts. Yet, they had rushed over without any fear. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 557. The Snake King's Might. A long whistling sound came from the tall courtyard wall as the shadow of three people flashed. Hai Chen-fong, Song Shang, and Bailey Luo Yun emerged on the top of the wall. The silvery sword in each individual's hand was reflecting the snow. Hai Chen-fong burst into a loud laughter and said, "Old Song, who could have thought that we would be fighting so many great masters one day? This is indeed a gratifying and happy matter." Song Shang sneered and grabbed a wine gourd from his back. Then, he drank a large mouthful and roared with a heroic spirit, "Excellent!" However, it was hard to guess whether he had found the wine to be excellent, or he had agreed with Hai Chen-feng's words. "Old Song, this Hai Chen-feng will invite you to drink a lifetime worth of wine if there's an afterlife." Hai Chen-feng laughed as a heroic feeling soared inside him. Song Shang suddenly laughed in response. He then said in a loud voice, "It's a deal. It's a deal." Hai Chen-feng promised in a heavy voice, "Clap hands and make a vow." Bang! The palms of the two men came together, and both men became brothers for the next life. It must be mentioned that these two men were veterans who had experienced hundreds of battles. So, how would they not know that they had walked into a dead end tonight? Could there be any hope of survival in the face of such a formidable opposition? However, the two men were still laughing. And their appearance was still bold and carefree. "You're good men. I also wish to drink wine with you guys in the afterlife. So, let me know if you think that I'm not qualified enough." Bailey Luo Yan's expressions were like ice. However, a cordial expression ignited in his eyes as he glanced at these two men. Hai Chen-feng and Song Shang glanced at each other in amazement. Then, they suddenly laughed out and said, "Who said you aren't qualified enough? You're a good brother. You are our brother from now on." Bang! The palms of the three men clapped together. They then looked at each other and burst into laughter. Hai Chen-feng and Song Shang didn't know Bailey Luo Yan very well. In fact, they had met him very recently and knew very little about him. However, they had become good brothers at this juncture where they were certain to meet their deaths. Moments of life and death are the best whetstone for a friendship. After all, one can't conceal their true nature while facing life and death moments. So, it becomes clear whether an individual is heroic, loyal, honest, or a cheat, a traitor, whether an individual's feelings are fake or genuine. Shi Changxiao and Lei Wubei also showed up in quick succession. But they had showed up in the enemy's lineup even though they had arrived here to congratulate the Jun family. However, this 4th and 6th ranked Great Master duo seemed rather ordinary in the Three Holy Lands lineup of experts. A sharp, jingling sound was heard at this time. It turned out that the Snake King and Ma Jiangming had already clashed against one another. However, they had drawn their weapons at the same time. So, it was obvious that this jingling sound had originated since their weapons had clashed into the opposite parties. It must be mentioned that both these individuals were the overlords of shady means. Therefore, they had assessed their enemy in their minds, and had chosen to draw their weapons at a time which would be most opportune to land a fatal blow to the enemy. But, who would have thought that their weapons would strike against the opposite parties? Ma Jiangming quickly retreated after they exchanged this blow. And that's because he had suddenly realized a rice grain-sized hole had been split open in his sword the moment it had come in contact with the enemy's weapon. I had used hundreds of weapons to refine this sword. This sword had costed me a great deal of effort and money in the past. In fact, I don't even remember how many talented individuals were killed by this sword. I had used this sword to move unhindered in the entire world. I had never defected in any manner. Who could have thought that it would break like this today? Ma Jiangming's cherished sword had suffered a major damage. This had left him alarmed and distressed. In fact, he felt as if his heart had been twisted in a very painful manner. He retreated with such urgency that it seemed as if his soul was about to fly away. The Snake King had gained the upper hand in this fight. So, she obviously wanted to pursue her retreating opponent. She twisted her waist, and her body bent to a strange extent in the air. In fact, it seemed as if her body had bent in 7 or 8 places. Then, she chased after her enemy at a very quick speed. It seemed as if a giant snake made of clouds and mist was swiftly descending like a blizzard in order to devour its enemy. A light flashed in Ma Jiangming's eyes since he had suddenly realized something. He then blurted out, "She turned out to be the Snake King. This is the signature move of Tianfa Forest's Snake King. The quick snake bends the waist in 7 places." However, Ma Jiangming immediately felt as if something was amiss. The Snake King had fought with Lei Wu Bei a few days ago. And he is one of the 8 great masters. However, the fight had been declared a draw. The Beast Kings are widely known for their physical strength. However, this had left me to assess that they are only as strong as a great master in human terms. In fact, this means that these Beast Kings possess great master level cultivation. However, I'm far above the great master level. So, how can she possibly force me to retreat in this manner? Moreover, this girl's speed is much faster than the legendary Snake Kings. In fact, it's far too fast. Her speed is so astonishing that I can barely breathe right now. How can the Snake King possibly command so much speed when she's only as strong as a great master? The Snake King had already arrived to attack him while he was thinking about this. She raised her sword, and it glittered with a silvery radiance. Ma Jiangming howled as he brandished his sword squarely to counter. This wasn't the time to think about his cherished sword. After all, he would lose his life if he didn't stake everything in this fight. That sword was very precious to him, but it wasn't dearer than his own life. The Snake King sneered upon seeing this. Her sword moved with a brushing sound, and came in contact with Ma Jiangming's weapon. However, this collision didn't produce a deafening sound like Ma Jiangming had anticipated. And that was because Snake King's sword had suddenly become flexible like a swift snake. Then, it wrapped itself around Ma Jiangming's sword. In fact, it conveniently attached itself to his sword's blade. Her sword then flipped over with a brushing sound, and changed its direction at an impossible angle. It scraped at Ma Jiangming's arm with a jeering sound, and blood came gushing out the wound. Even his bone had become visible through this deep wound. Ma Jiangming let out a loud hissing sound. His usually hardship-stricken face contorted with pain, and beads of sweat rolled down his face. He had genuinely been struck with a hardship this time around. He bent his waist backwards as he retreated with anxiety. This man was a famed expert of his generation, and his strength had already transcended the great master level. However, he had been pushed into such a perilous situation by the Snake King in only a few moves. He had surely somewhat underestimated his enemy. But it was evident that the Snake King's newfound speed and weird sword had differed from his expectations by a very far margin. Something flashed in Green Hunter's eyes as the corners of her mouth curved into a sneer. Her flexible sword suddenly changed directions, and became as solid as iron. Then, it stabbed towards Ma Jiangming's chest. How could Green Hunter not understand the peril of her enemy's situation? She obviously knew that her team would be greatly benefited in case she was able to eliminate one of the strongest members of the enemy's team in one fell swoop. The second half of the Snake King's sword was still wrapped around Ma Jiangming's sword. But the front half had seemingly launched an attack by itself. Moreover, her sword's blade seemed to be moving like electricity. The tip of her sword split like a fork and attacked like a poisonous viper's tongue. It was as fast as the sound of a thunder. It was obvious that Ma Jiangming wouldn't be able to dodge this attack. The sound of two angry roars was heard at this time. Two great master-level experts dashed forward and attacked from the left and right sides. A sword flashed towards the Snake King's left shoulder with a whoosh as a man's palm tried to slam into her head. Ma Jiangming would inevitably suffer serious injuries if Green Hunter maintained the momentum of her sword's attack. In fact, he was very likely to die from this. But she would also barely get away with it. However, it seemed that she would have to abandon her sword and retreat in case she wanted to dodge the attacks from those two men. It suddenly seemed that her clever trick of entangling her opponent's weapon had turned into the biggest obstacle in advancing or withdrawing her own sword. However, it must be mentioned that this besiegen rescue attack was exquisite in its own accord. A man of Ma Jiangming's status had initially regarded that he would be able to fight the Snake King by himself. Moreover, he had assumed that he would be able to press his enemy down in this one-sided battle. He had even smiled and rejoiced at this thought. However, he had been defeated in a matter of a few moves. Moreover, two other men had been forced to gang up a sneak attack on the Snake King in order to rescue him from this perilous situation. It could be said that Ma Jiangming's reputation had suffered a massive hit. In fact, his reputation wasn't the only thing which had taken a huge hit. The entire Three Holy Lands' fame had been discredited. However, the Three Holy Lands people didn't pay any attention to this matter at this time. And that's because everyone had seen that the Snake King's sword was super powerful. Would anyone pay heed to a little stigma if they obtained such an amazing weapon at the end of it? History books are always written by the winners. The Jun family's destruction is a foregone conclusion as of today. So, who will know about this unpleasant episode as long as we didn't divulge it to the outside world? Green Hunter sneered loudly. She then spoke up with a taunt. The Three Holy Lands ganged up to beat one person. This had genuinely broadened my horizons. Have the Three Holy Lands dropped to the status of city thugs? However, she didn't stop while talking. The tip of her sword made a cut on Ma Jiangming's chest. Then, it calmly recoiled backwards. Her sword also released its grip around the enemy it had entangled. She then ducked away before the other sword struck her. She was only one individual with one sword. However, it had still seemed as if there had been two equally smart and quick snakes on the battlefield. Moreover, she had quickly retreated almost 30 meters within one whirl and flash. In fact, her body hadn't faced the slightest amount of obstruction in doing so. The Snake King's quick and smart movements had transcended the assumptions of everyone present there by a very far margin. It could be said that everyone had been frightened by this. After all, Ma Jiangming's body would have been cleft into two parts if the Snake King hadn't been forced into retracting her sword under the pressure of those two great master-level experts' ambush. Relentless roars were being heard from a different side of the battlefield. Big Bear and Earthcracker were very short-tempered beast kings. Therefore, they had already started fighting against three famed great masters. Zi Jinghong narrowed his eyes in a dangerous-looking manner. He then slowly asked, "Are you the Snake King?" Snake King snorted and replied, "Yes, I am the Snake King. What are you going to do about it?" "That means that those two men over there must be the Tiger King and the Bear King?" Zi Jinghong revealed a faint smile across his face as he looked at the Snake King. It seemed as if he had discovered a huge treasure. Green Hunter sneered. Zi Jinghong, don't you think you're a bit weird? What are you trying to say? How can someone as powerful as you be as sentimental as a woman? Heavens are truly helping me. This trip to the Jun family has given unexpected profits. Who could have thought that it would have been this easy to get hold of 3 Xian cores? This has saved me a long and difficult trek to Tianfa. Zi Jinghong laughed wildly. He waved his hands and ordered in a stern voice, "Kill them. Don't leave them alive." His subordinates from the illusory ocean of blood responded in chorus. They then moved forward in a circular formation. Their sharp weapons flashed cold lights, and it was evident that they were ready to move into action. "Wait!" Mei Shuayan shouted in a neutral tone. A sharp light flashed in her eyes as she said, "Zi Jinghong, what did you just say? You said that you wanted the Beast King's Xian cores?" Her tone had been gloomy, but it had still embodied the incisive effect of a threatening one. In fact, it was somewhat eerie sounding. Anyone who had heard it had felt as if stormy clouds were approaching to press down upon them. The Beast King's Xian cores are the most precious things in the entire world. Who wouldn't want them? Zi Jinghong faintly laughed. His hands were folded behind his back at this time. His expressions were that of leisure and confidence. He then faintly said, "This Zi Jinghong is also a man who practices the Xian arts, you know." He had even managed to enact a sobbing sigh when he had spoken that last sentence. "Zi Jinghong, you have some guts on you. Do you even know who I am?" Mei Shuayan spoke up in a stern voice. "You dare to be so impudent in front of me? Do you know that you've just written your death warrant?" He. Venerable Mei, attempting to keep things a secret doesn't mean that they remain hidden. Did you genuinely believe that this old man wouldn't recognize you until now? I had covered thousands of miles to chase and kill you back in the day. It was such a wonderful feeling. In fact, this old man still remembers that feeling. Venerable Mei, fortune had favored you at that time. But it's a pity that luck doesn't favor the same person forever. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 558. A world-shaking supernatural entity. Half-Bodied smiled strangely. He then looked at Mei Shuayan's exquisite and delicate body in an extremely indecent manner with his only eye. Then, he clicked his tongue and spoke up. "It can be said that today's events have implied something. For Beast Kings left Tianfa and arrived at the Jun family. This is the most unexpected reward for us. In fact, it seems that the heavens are on our side. This is a big surprise. After all, Venerable Mei is a famed entity of the Xian continent. She's the supreme leader of Tianfa. This old man had never anticipated that she would turn out to be a woman. Moreover, I had never imagined that she could hide in another man's home in order to indulge in a shady and illicit relationship with him." Mei Shuayan's face turned pale. "Half-Bodied, do you wish to court your death?" Half-Bodied laughed mischievously. Venerable Mei possesses enough strength to seize this half-bodied's head whenever she wants. But it seems that it won't be that easy today. However, there's something I fail to understand. Venerable Mei, may I ask you for guidance?" He flashed a sinister smile. "What is it?" Mei Shuayan's charming face turned fiendish as bloody rays of light twinkled in her eyes. Venerable Mei is a very experienced and knowledgeable person. Couldn't you find any other man in so many years? I've heard that the Jun family's young fellow isn't even 20 years of age. Perhaps the taste of that young fellow from the Jun family makes you extremely ecstatic? Maybe he gives you an urge you can't resist? That's probably why you long to commit fervent adultery with him. Is this why you've crossed thousands of miles and arrived in Tianxiang City to be in his bed? Venerable Mei's name had shaken every direction in this continent at one point. However, this old man is very curious to know about Venerable Mei's current status. What is your ranking amongst Jun Moxie's concubines? After all, the first wife's position is gone. I've heard that it was taken by Jun Moxie's lewd sister-in-law. Perhaps the first concubine's position is also unavailable. After all, there's Dugu Xiao Yi from the Dugu family. So, are you the third one, or the fourth? Ha ha ha. Half-bodied sinisterly looked at Mei Shuayan with the one eye he had. Then, he shot an extremely lascivious gaze at her while sneering and licking his lips. Venerable Mei, it can be said that we are contemporaries. But, you're indulging in a relationship with a much younger man. Don't you feel ashamed of it? You might look like a young maiden when stripped naked on bed. But, that young fellow can never be as good as the experienced people of our generation. It's true that half of my body is gone. But, that part of my body remains intact. So, if you're interested, or if you're unable to satisfy yourselves. In fact, I haven't touched it much over the years. So, I'm confident that I possess a great amount of masculine energy in it. Anyway, I'll be far better than that rich and ignorant young fellow. We could even teach each other a thing or two. It would be such a beautiful encounter. He hadn't even finished speaking when a loud hissing sound was heard from the sky. Mei Shuayan had already arrived above his head. Half-bodied raised his only arm and began to swirl in circles. His movements created several intermingled after-images in the air. He shouted as tried his best to resist her attacks. The snake is out of the hole. The 30 hidden soldiers, ambush and kill her. 30 hidden soldiers rushed onto the scene with brushing sounds as soon as he roared. They then encircled her. Zi Jinghong and Xiao Wei Cheng also rushed over and launched a pincer attack on Mei Shuayan with their entire might. Half-bodied shouted and launched an offensive at Mei Shuayan even though he had been pressed down by her attacks. In fact, he had counterattacked with full force. The remaining 27 above Great Master level experts also moved into action at the same time. All of them had the same target. And this individual was standing at the center of their encirclement, Mei Shuayan. It seemed as if the 60 other Great Master level experts had also been briefed about this action. They slammed together to form a wall of people and obstructed the Snake King and the others from coming to her rescue. This is a trap. This is a trap for me, a death trap against Venerable Mei. Mei Shuayan quickly realized that they had guessed my identity long ago. That's why Half-Bodied tried to arouse my anger a moment ago. He wanted to lure me into this trap. And they've ambushed me with such a force because they wish to bury me here. However, it needs to be understood that Mei Shuayan would have jumped into this trap even if she had been aware of it in advance. And this was only because of the insults Half-Bodied had thrown at her. After all, no woman could endure such words of insult. They had been extremely sinister and vicious. Mei Shuayan hissed in a high-pitched tone as her body flashed at a very high speed. She ducked past the danger with a hair's breadth to spare, and quickly abandoned her original route of advance. After all, she had suddenly fallen into a tight ambush by 30 experts who were above the Great Master level. She ducked past 2 experts by retreating 6 meters. Then, she let her kick loose in a ghostly manner. A white-haired expert was caught off guard by her attack. He was sent rolling out like a ball as blood spurted out from his mouth with gurgling sounds. Mei Shuayan quickly retreated as this happened. Then, she shot her palms outwards at the speed of lightning. 2 loud booms were heard as 2 experts were struck by her palms. their bodies twisted as their long hair fluttered backwards. It seemed as if a quick and heavy whip had slammed into their backs. The two men screamed as their bodies were sent rolling to the left and right. They rolled on the ground and left only drops of blood in their wake. Mei Shuiyan's agile and graceful body slipped past the gap between two other men. However, the front and back of the bodies of these two men had been lit up by a cold sword light. Mei Shuiyan sneered. She then twisted her wrists, and a magnificent shining object appeared in her hand. In fact, it looked as bright and shiny as the sun when it rises into the sky from the east. Then, her body whirled around at a very high speed. A buzzing sound was heard as a seemingly concealed cold light condensed around Mei Shuiyan's body out of nowhere. In fact, it seemed as if the shiny stars from the galaxy itself had formed an iron wall around her body. Ding! 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 A series of shattering sounds were heard as 8 peak-level swordsmen who were trying to besiege Mei Shuiyan retreated in horror and amazement. Only half of their swords had remained in their hands by now. They had seen that the Snake King owned a divine weapon. But didn't these people know how difficult it was to obtain such a divine weapon? However, they had never expected that Mei Shuiyan would also have one. Moreover, it seemed that the quality of Mei Shuiyan's weapon was even superior to that of the Snake King's. In fact, everyone who had made contact with her weapon had suffered a loss. None of these individuals were random folk. In fact, each of them was an entity above the Great Master level. So, how could their weapons be ordinary? How could their weapons not have some history? Which of their weapons hadn't shed the blood of thousands? However, these extraordinary weapons of theirs had broken in front of Mei Shuiyan's divine sword in the same manner that the snowflakes disappear under sunlight. However, she was far from done. Mei Shuiyan had already made a firm resolve to move into action. Therefore, she was no longer going to be emotional about it. She lowered her body. Then, she used her left foot as the axis, and rotated her beautiful body in a crazed manner. A loud explosion was heard as 3 ball-like round sword energies came into appearance. These balls of sword energy then shot off in 3 different directions. Every direction began to glitter with a smooth, lustrous, and bright band of light. In fact, it appeared as if these bands of light had derived their illumination from the galaxy itself. These 3 balls of sword light looked like cannon fire if we were to use an analogy from Jun Moxie's previous life to describe it. She had attacked 3 directions at the same time. Mei Shuiyan has put her entire strength into this attack. She hadn't left any margin for leeway. Ning Wuqing, Ma Jiangming, half-bodied, Zi Jinghong, Xiao Wencheng cried out as they frantically prepared themselves to defend against this attack. The remaining 20 people or so also gathered their entire strengths and prepared themselves to withstand Mei Shuiyan's manic and devilish strength. This Lord of Tian Fa had finally set her heart on killing. An individual of noble character may be taken advantage of. However, what if an individual of noble character decided to stop being noble? Thereupon, any individual attempting to take advantage of them would have to pay a heavy price. Especially if they considered it to be as easy as fooling an ordinary individual. This had happened because the Jun family's people had been caught up in an extremely dangerous situation. Jun Zhantian, Jun Wu Yi, Solitary Falcon, and the others had gotten involved in the battle. And this meant that the danger was imminent. Dozens of gloomy and blood-curdling shrieks were heard. Even Mei Shuiyan was heard groaning. She tried to walk, but her body staggered from left to right. In fact, she couldn't walk more than 7 or 8 steps. Blood oozed out of the corners of her mouth. Some blood could also be seen dripping out of her sleeves. And 3 distinct palm marks could be seen on her vest and left shoulder. Her strength had been exhausted. After all, 30 experts with strengths above the Great Master level had come to assault her. This obviously wasn't a trivial matter. Mei Shuayan was the lord of Tianfa. But even she was no match for 30 above Great Master level experts. She had sustained serious injuries during their collision. But she didn't have much of an alternative in the current situation. The enemy's attacks would have surged on like a might river in case she had decided to retreat. And they wouldn't have stopped until they had killed her. There are only 2 ways to confront such an attack: take a risk and gather your strength to fight, or flee far away. Mei Shuayan's strength could ensure that no one would have been able to block her path if she had decided to escape. But the Jun family's people were trapped here. 3 Xian beast kings were also here. And everybody had gotten caught in a tough battle. So, how could someone with Mei Shuayan's good-willed nature have walked away by herself? She had no other alternative but to gather her strength and face them. Mei Shuayan had recently made a breakthrough. Therefore, this battle shouldn't have been a big risk for her. However, it was a pity that she hadn't experienced a battle of this intensity in a long time. Moreover, this battle had broken out without any signs of warnings. And this had stirred up her old wounds. This had piled up the problems even higher. It was as if this incident had added hail to the snow. Her age-old wounds had suddenly resurfaced. In fact, they had flared up at this frightening moment. Mei Shuayan could even feel the blood oozing out of her internal organs like a river. The sinister energy she had been trying to expel from her body over the years had started to gain ground once again. Mei Shuayan had been feeling very cold in her heart today. Could this have been the reason behind that? It must be said that Mei Shuayan had found it difficult to endure this blow. But the experts from the 3 Holy Lands hadn't had it easy either. In fact, they had been left in a much more desperate situation than Mei Shuayan. The Lord of Tianfa Forest had attacked with her entire strength. Could this be described as a trivial matter? 9 arms and 3 feet lay in front of Mei Shuayan in a pool of blood. The ground appeared more like a beach for an ocean of blood. The snow had already disappeared on the ground. The ground was as hard as stone. However, half a foot of its thickness had been peeled off. The nearest fence wall of the Jun family's residence had also collapsed. That wall had been at about a distance of 60 meters from there. However, the immense amount of sword energy had silently eroded the wall away. Mei Shuayan had been particularly considerate in taking care of Half-Bodied. His face had been extremely ugly from the start. But it had 3 additional huge sword scars now. His muscles had also rolled up to expose the white bones underneath. He had also been stabbed thrice in the chest. Hence, blood was incessantly oozing out of his bosom. His injuries were extremely serious. Zi Jinghong's hair had scattered loose. His purple robe had been riddled with holes. And this had exposed the soft golden armor he wore underneath. Moreover, numerous sword scars were clearly visible on it. A stream of blood could be seen oozing out from the inside. The crown on top of Xiao Wei Cheng's head had gone missing a long time ago. His body was covered with more than a dozen wounds. They had been made by her sword. Blood was flowing out from his body with murmuring sounds like a rivulet. In fact, it had flowed along his body, and had dyed his robe a shade of deep red. Ning Wuqing was panting for breath. His long sword was slanted towards the ground. A single strand of blood was flowing along the long sword and dripping down to the ground. Then, it was slowly converging with the pool of blood on the ground. This had happened because Mei Shuiyan's sword had severely slashed at his right arm. However, Ma Jiangming didn't appear injured at first. He even stood steady for a while. However, a sound of vomiting was heard a few moments later. This sound had originated because he had started to vomit blood. A closer look at the pool of blood formed by his vomit would have revealed that 5 or 6 of his teeth had also exited his jaw. The scene turned tranquil for a moment after that earth-shattering blow by Mei Shuiyan. No one was looking at Mei Shuiyan at this time. They had first gazed at those severed limbs that lay on the ground. Then, they had looked at their leaders. However, even their leaders were in a sorry state of affairs at this time. Consequently, a chill ran down everyone's spine. In fact, it seemed as if a poisonous viper had landed on their backs. This chill had even seeped deep into their bones. Such astonishing strength was extremely alarming and frightening. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 559. The Tragic Emotions of Desperation. Many subordinates of the elusive world of immortals who were involved in this besiege had also taken part in the previous ambush on Mei Shuiyan. And these people had unequivocally realized that the present Venerable Mei wasn't the same as the Venerable Mei from those many years ago. She's still an individual of noble character anyone can take advantage of. She had been worried about the battle for seizing the heavens at that time. Therefore, the benevolent Venerable Mei hadn't attacked them this heavily. Therefore, everyone had been left to feel as if there was a guarantee that they wouldn't lose their lives even if the battle became very intense. And this had made them even more unscrupulous about the dangers on this ambush. Consequently, they had decided to kill her without a worry on their minds. However, the Venerable Mei they were facing today seemed very fierce. In fact, it seemed as if she couldn't wait to slaughter them with her sword. There was no doubt that the current Venerable Mei was a few-fold fiercer than the previous noble Venerable Mei. Moreover, they had misjudged Venerable Mei's strength. And that was grave mistake. The people who had been involved in that fight knew that Venerable Mei had suffered many injuries during that ambush. However, they had asked themselves, and had realized that solely being able to rehabilitate such injuries and reattain that level of strength would be a great achievement from their standards. And this was when they had spent the entire time since that battle in doing so. However, they knew that it was impossible to make another breakthrough in this period of time. Venerable Mei was the lord of Tianfa Forest. However, they had believed that even she wouldn't be an exception to this. And this had been a major factor in the Three Holy Lands conspiracy to eradicate the Tianfa Forest. However, they had now realized that Venerable Mei's old wounds had seemingly healed. Moreover, her realm had advanced to a new level. In fact, her strength was far more than what it had been in the past. However, there was another fact which was even more dreadful: her speed had increased. In fact, it hadn't merely increased by a small margin, it had increased a few times. Mei Shuiyan's speed had already been the fastest in the entire continent at that time. However, she had become even faster now. What kind of terrifying speed was this? No one could dare to imagine it. However, they were fortunate that they had managed to choreograph a subtle situation this time. After all, she couldn't escape alone today. Otherwise, these 30 men wouldn't have been able to keep her from leaving. However, this was a deadlock where it didn't matter how fast her current speed was, or how advanced her strength's realm had become. After all, a total of 30 above the great master level experts were grinding to kill her. Moreover, she had been burdened with the Jun family's safety. And 3 of the Beast Kings were also present here. So, How could she be willing to flee? This meant that she would die as long as she didn't walk away. They were lucky that this was a situation wherein she would die. After all, would she be able to sleep at night in case fled? Didn't this still make her an individual of noble character anyone can take advantage of? Half-bodied roared malevolently. He took the lead and shouted, "Attack! Everyone attack together. This slut is seriously injured. She will last long. Even a light injury can kill her. I will kill her with my entire strength. I will split her belly with my own hands. Then, I will take out her Xian core and see what kind of beast she is. She believes that she's not a beast when she takes a human form. In fact, she feels that she's a human now." Mei Shuiyan's eyes were slightly closed, and her fairy-like face was still calm and indifferent. She gently spoke up, "Half-bodied, I will kill you today, even if I die. You say that I'm a beast, but you're an out-and-out bastard." Half-bodied burst into a loud laughter. He only had one eye and one hand. So, he looked even more malevolent when he distorted his face. Blood flowed down his face as he said in a fierce way, "Do you think that you still do that in your current state? Venerable Mei, don't tell me that you've gotten this confidence because you found yourself a young man to be in bed with? Haha. In fact, this old man doesn't feel like killing you in a hurry anymore. Instead, I wish to capture you alive now. Then, I will grab that boy toy of your Jun Moxie. After all, I wish to see what you two do in bed. In fact, I think that everyone in this world is very curious about this. After all, Venerable Mei's name shakes the entire continent. But, she still shamelessly gets into a young man's bed. So, there must be something special about his performance. Perhaps this old man will castrate that young man in front of you. That ought to let you know how this old man rolls. Wouldn't that be something to look forward to? Ha ha ha. You are shameless. Dang you." The murderous desire reappeared on Mei Shuiyan's face. She clenched her silvery teeth and raised her sword above her head. The sword energy filled the entire sky. Zi Jinghong, half-bodied, and Xiao Wei Cheng roared in unison, "Kill her." All the experts shouted and charged forward with their swords at the same time. The sword lights spread out like a forest. And the sword energies lashed out like waves. Mei Shuiyan's figure seemed very lonely as she stood in front of 30 above great master-level experts. She slightly closed her eyes. However, the trace of a gentle smile still blossomed on her captivating yet blood-stained lips. She thought, "It's good that there's no sign of him amongst the people who've showed up to fight. It seems that he has escaped. Everything will be fine as long as he can escape and live his life. My sacrifice will not be in vain. However, it's a pity that I won't be able to see him again." Elder sister. Snake King frantically waved her sword as she let out a blood-curdling roar. Then, she crazily rushed towards this side. Jun Zhantian and Jun Wu Yi were fighting with everything they had. They had brandished their weapons and were flashed them right and left. But their strengths were far lesser than their opponents. In fact, they would have lost their lives a long time ago if Solitary Falcon and Feng Wanyun weren't doing their best to protect them. Their extraordinary weapons had also played a major role in saving their lives. However, they had fallen into a disadvantageous position even though they had these helping factors. In fact, it was just a matter of time before they either got defeated or captured. It could even be assumed that these 4 individuals would have been killed by the experts from the 3 Holy Lands if the 2 men from the Jun family weren't linked with the whereabouts of those mysterious pills. The enemy was refraining from hurting them too seriously. After all, they wanted to fish out the important information from the mouths of Jun family's people. And that's because everyone knew that it was hopeless to try capturing the beast kings of TNFA. And this was particularly the case when it came to Venerable Mei. These people could only be killed since they were too strong. And this meant that only these two men from the Jun family could tell them about the whereabouts of those divine pills. Two bang sounds were heard, and Jun Zhantien stumbled in retreat. Blood was overflowing from the corners of his mouth. Jun Wuyi's sharp longsword's blade was moving left and right in an unorthodox manner. He somehow cut off the swords of 3 of his opponents. Then, he waved his sword and injured one man at his waist. However, a palm struck his lower abdomen as this happened, and he was sent rolling. He fell on the ground, but stumbled to stand firm again. His face had already turned ashen, and he didn't have any strength left. But Third Master Jun's eyes were still roaring with fury. It was evident that he wasn't afraid. Jun Moxie hadn't rushed out in this moment of crisis. Jun Zhantien and Jun Wuyi were hot-blooded and fearless real men. And they wouldn't regret dying 9 deaths as long as the Jun family's bloodline persisted in this world. Elder sister. Big Bear and Earthcracker opened their eyes wide. They then violently rushed towards Mei Shuayan in spite of the punches and kicks that landed on their bodies as they made their way forward. Go back. Mei Shuayan's expressions remained calm as she ordered in a stern voice. However, attacks came at her from all the directions at this time. Mei Shuayan laughed heartily as her white robes fluttered in the air. Then, she rushed forward while disregarding all thoughts of her personal safety. I will kill this half-bodied even if I die. This man had landed a very serious blow on her many years ago. And he had humiliated and insulted her today, and her man. Kill. I must kill this half-bodied. I must kill this lowly bastard. Constant sounds of the whistling were coming from everywhere. Hai Chenfeng, Song Shang, and Bailey Lu Yun had led the Heaven Destroyers and the Soul Devourers to swarm the battlefield. The battle had reached the final stages. So, this was the best time to die if one wanted death. 300 Xian beast crossbows were shot at the same time. It was like a downpour of arrows. The sturdy bodies of the Heaven Destroyers and Soul Devourers roared forward to their deaths with angered war cries. The housekeeper Old Pang led the Jun family's bodyguards to dash in from the other side. These people were confronted with enemies who possessed the strength of Great Master and above the Great Master level experts. So, it could be said that they had come to throw their lives away. And each of them knew this. They had come rushing, but they knew that they had no chance of returning back alive. However, they had lived under the Jun family's kindness for a long time. Moreover, the bravery and loyalty of these men wouldn't allow them to flee at this time. Let's die if death has come. But let's die together. A tall and sturdy figure furiously dashed to the front of this group which had come here to die. This man's hair was white like silver. His head was like that of a tiger. He howled like thunder as he seemingly flew forward. Jun Zhantien, this old man has come to die with you. It was Du Gezongheng. This old man had been recuperating from his age-old injuries at the Jun family's residence these days. He had fully recovered from his illness, but he had gotten caught up in his catastrophe instead. It must be said that many people had charged in because it was too late to avoid this disaster. However, this old man had dashed in faster than anyone else. These two old men had worked together their entire lives. They had been entangled in many grievances over the last 60 years. But Duga Zongheng had still made this choice without the slightest hesitation at this critical moment. They had lived their lives together. So, they ought to die together as well. In fact, Duga Zongheng would have felt as his entire life had been in vain if he had abandoned Jun Zhangtian in this critical moment and fled instead. I will never be able to live happily again. Duga Zongheng doesn't run away from a battle. Therefore, Old Man Dugu had taken the lead and rushed out. Nearly 1,000 men rushed forth like a swarm of bees. They had come to face experts who were thousands of times more powerful than themselves with blood-red eyes. However, they hadn't shown any fear in the face of this suicidal charge. Everyone's face was painted in a shade of heroic desperation. Everyone seemed desolate, but without any regrets. Heroes don't harbor regrets. They only hoped that their hot blood gushed out when their enemy's sword pierced them. They only hoped to dye the snow red. Their charge was neither to defend their country, nor to save their people from dangers. In fact, there was no purpose to it. They didn't have any purpose. They had only done this to die. Death. Only death. Perhaps their minds were unable to think with clarity. Perhaps it was merely a momentary urge. But who thinks so much when warm blood rushes forth? The Jun family had made so many people accompany them in this madness. The Jun family's charm was clearly visible from this. This may have been the momentary urge of unstable minds. However, this was also the most praiseworthy action. After all, this had nothing to do with life or death. It had nothing to do with fame either. This was only about loyalty. A soldier had come to die for his comrade. These words were best means to interpret this moment. Even the many great experts from the three holy lands were left palpitating with fear at the sight of this heroic scene. What kind of a magical power does this Jun family have that made so many people have willingly come to die? Don't they have any regrets? Don't they regret dying? No one had expected that there would be some mishap today. Therefore, the Jun family had relatively lesser staff in its quarters. It could be said that the tide of people who would vehemently come to die would have increased by a lot if they had been given more time to prepare. In fact, not much time would have been needed for this. Only one day would have been enough to increase this multiplier by 100. There would have been too many people. And none of them would have hesitated to use the flesh of their chest to meet the ice-cold sword of the enemies like these ones. However, these people couldn't make any difference. These surely weren't afraid of dying, but they were too weak. In fact, the strongest among them only possessed Sky Xian strength. And they had dashed into the defensive lines of great master-level experts with this kind of strength. This was like a mayfly trying to shake a tree, or a mantis trying to stop a chariot. It was akin to bringing about one's own destruction. These people are so eager to die. So, we will help in fulfilling their wish. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 560. Shrouds the sky and appears. Which of the experts from the three holy lands wasn't a seasoned fighter? Which one of them wasn't vicious and merciless when it came to killing people? Which one amongst them hadn't crawled out of an ocean of blood and a mountain of corpses? Would such individuals even care about slaughtering 1,000 extra people? Each of them stood still at their spots. Their eyes were emitting grim rays of light as they waited for that tide of suicidal people to arrive. Some of them had even decided to move into action with full force. We should be able to wipe out these idiots in a matter of 4 or 5 breaths. One mustn't get emotional in matters of life and death. We admit that these people are extremely loyal and brave. And we know that we will sigh in admiration later on. But You'll only get death since you're coming to face us. The eyes of the great master-level experts were burning with violent desires to kill. And this tide of people was approaching. The corners of Jun Xien's mouth were stained with blood. He looked at the stream of people who had once pledged their lives to him. And a strand of pain flickered in his eyes. 2 drops of tears rolled down his eyes. He was well aware that any attempts to persuade these people to withdraw would go in vain. Good. Come and die with this old man. We'll go to the netherworld and conquer everything there. Jun Xie roared, and his loud voice shook the entire world. His voice was filled with tragic despair. In fact, traces of these emotions could also be felt in the atmosphere around. Kill. There was a split second when the 2 parties were on the verge of colliding. The miserable sounds of murder, the clamor of the colliding swords. Everything had abruptly vanished from the world in this moment between life and death. The world had suddenly fallen into silence. It was the silence of death. A massive and powerful momentum arose from the ends of the world in an unending stream. In fact, it had appeared very abruptly. However, it had filled the vast world even though it had appeared less than a tenth of an eye's blink ago. It seemed as if the sky was falling down, like a tsunami that was reaching to the sky. This momentum was too heavy to resist. Even the top experts such as Mei Shuiyan, half-bodied, Zi Jinghong felt the same way at this time. The sky is about to collapse. The earth is about to sink in. Is the world's end upon? They felt as if a great force was pushing down from the sky. And it seemed as if the entire blue dome of heaven was about to fall down as a result. Moreover, the sky seemed to be brimming with an endlessly powerful and violent rage of murderous desires. This was indeed the frightening power of the heaven and the earth. No human power could ever compete against this kind of a force. No one was able to give any command whatsoever. In fact, everyone merely held their movements at this time. No one moved. They stood fixed at their spots. Many of them had already launched their swords with the aim to split their enemy in 2. Their swords would have intersected with another sword a moment later. However, everyone's actions came to a standstill in the air at the same time. Who knows what's going on here? Have the heaven and earth rebelled? Perhaps some unopposable force has decided to descend to the world of mortals. But how dreadful could this individual be? In this case, momentum has been created by a human. Suddenly, a voice was heard. So, is this the way the 3 holy lands are trying to protect the common people? I presume it needs a little change if that's so. There was nothing special about this voice. It was calm and dull. However, it had still exploded everyone's mind like a clap of thunder. Everyone's eyes traced to the direction where the sound had originated from. And their eyes eventually rested at the top of the Jun family's tower. A wide and black gown was gently fluttering in the snowy breeze. However, it wasn't known why this black robe seemed as heavy as a mountain to the eyes of the people from the 3 holy lands. Everyone could clearly feel a terrible and frightening power pressing over them. Mannerisms could be counterfeited. Appearances could be forged. But no one had ever been able to counterfeit such imposing momentum since times immemorial. So, what kind of cultivation would be needed to possess such an imposing manner? Even a Sky Xian expert would inevitably release their Xian momentum if they were to face an attack. However, it wasn't possible for the said expert to release the enchanting momentum of the spirit Xian realm. In fact, it was impossible for the said individual to exhibit spirit Xian momentum. A Sky Xian expert could only display the most authentic and unadulterated chi field of the Sky Xian realm. Everyone knew this. No one had been an exception to this since times immemorial. However, the black-robed man present before their eyes was exhibiting a heaven-startling momentum. In fact, these people couldn't even dare to imagine what realms he had ascended to. But it was evident that he had become unrivaled on this land. Half-bodied, Zi Jinghong and Xiao Wei Cheng glanced at each other. And each of them saw uneasiness in the eyes of the other. The three of them felt the same way: this man's strength is at least at par with Venerable Mei. Or maybe a little more than that. We reckon that even we 90 great master-level experts won't be enough to compete against this man. How can such a heavenly and magical individual exist in this world? This man is frightening. Half-bodied waved his hand. And that tide of people from the three holy lands stepped back. They quickly formed a circle, reformed their battle formations, and started to recover their strengths. Mei Shuayan also used this time to retreat. Meanwhile, Snake King and her people also met up with Feng Wanyun, Solitary Falcon, Jun Wuyi and Jun Zhantian. Hai Chen Feng led the group of soldiers, and they arranged themselves in order to obstruct the enemies. In fact, these soldiers had formed a thick human wall. May I dare to ask the identity of His Excellency? You have appeared here at this moment. So, I presume that there must be a reason behind it. My three holy lands are doing everything for the welfare of the common people. We are doing this for the future of our continent. Our methods may have some shortcomings, but our conscience is clear. Zi Jinghong cupped his hands together in greeting. He had spoken strong words, but his mannerism had been very modest. After all, such a strong man was worthy of everyone's respect. The strength of this man in black robes has reached the pinnacle. Zi Jinghong was certainly ranked third in the illusory ocean of blood, but even he couldn't prevent himself from admiring this man. Me? Haha, the man in the black gown chuckled in a heavy voice. He then spoke up in a vague manner. I haven't appeared in the world for a while now. And it seems that this world has already forgotten me. I must say that humans have an amazing talent for forgetfulness. Anyway, you people dare say that you have a clear conscience even though you're behaving in such a way. This old man has lived for many years. But you've opened my eyes today. Be it right or wrong, these methods are for the good of common people. However, we acknowledge that they might not be the best methods. So, I humbly seek forgiveness from Your Excellency if you disapprove of our methods. Zi Jinghong raised his eyes and looked towards the top of the tower. However, I still request Your Excellency to tell us about your origins. Would you leave after I tell you about my origins? Three holy lands will always remain the three holy lands. And they will never contain to live in fear. The black-robed man shook his head while he sighed. It appeared as if he had sighed with sorrow. Everyone had heard his words clearly. However, no one had been able to make out whether he had said these words to praise or to demean. The black-robed man continued. This old man had taught a lesson to the so-called second great master when he had gone to Tien Fa that last time. But it seems that it wasn't enough. You wish to know what this old man has been up to? Do you even have the strength to demand this? The black-robed man slowly raised his right foot after he was done talking. His body had moved 100 feet away from the tower in midair by the time he lifted his left foot to take the second step. Moreover, he was walking with his hands folded behind his back as if he was leisurely walking down a staircase. The eyebrows of every great master who stood below shot up in amazement when they saw this scene. It must be mentioned that each one of them could jump to such a height if they were to use their Xian strength. In fact, most of them could jump to heights even higher than that tower. And jumping down from such a height wasn't difficult for them either, neither was leisurely floating down. However, Walking up or down as normally as this man in the black robes was impossible for them. In fact, it was something they couldn't even dream of. Moreover, this wasn't the only strange thing that had occurred. The black-robed man was taking his steps in the void itself. But everyone could hear a loud thud every time he stepped forward. How can his steps give rise to clear thud sounds if he's walking in midair? It was needless to say that these thuds were reverberating in everyone's hearts like thunder strikes. This was an outrageously unimaginable scene. No had ever witnessed something like this. Even the folklores had never entailed such an incident. However, this miracle had occurred in front of their eyes. So, they obviously couldn't comprehend this. Is the air acting like solid ground for his feet? Moreover, each word of every line that black-robed man had spoken thus far was hopping about inside everyone's mind. His words make it seem like he's Jun Moxie's mysterious master. He's that mysterious man who had burned Li Ju-Tian to death outside the southern heaven city. It could be said that the people gathered here were the top great masters from the last several hundred years. Moreover, 30 above great master level experts were also present on the scene. However, which one of them could confidently say that they could kill Li Ju-Tian in a single strike? In fact, many of them couldn't even have the assurance of killing Li Ju-Tian in a fight. After all, Li Ju-Tian's strength had already reached close to transcending the great master level. Otherwise, how could he even have come in contact with the elusive land of immortals? Killing someone who was about to reach the levels above the great master realm in one strike? That was impossible. Even thinking about something like this was tantamount to fantasizing. However, this impossible had been made possible by someone. Moreover, that said individual was present before the eyes of these 90 experts from the 3 holy lands. So, Your Excellency is Jun Moxie's mysterious master? Zi Jinghong's pupils contracted as he asked. The 3 holy lands had heard about Jun Moxie's mysterious master a while ago. They had heard that he possessed mysteriously exceptional strength. So, they knew that he was rumored to be unrivaled in the entire continent. However, how could they have imagined that this mysterious man would emerge at such a critical time, and would turn out to be this powerful? Yes. You're right. I'm Jun Moxie's master. Moreover, I'm also the man everyone has been looking for. The black-robed man hadn't spoken angrily. Instead, he had spoken in an extremely insipid voice. I'm the man who refines those mysterious pills. So, I'm the man you are looking for. I'm the one you've come here for. And I'm the man you intended to grab, return with, and then use for concocting those pills. Boom! Everyone was left dumbfounded. Their bodies began to tremble. They felt the heavenly defying energy that was emanating from this black-robed man, and they couldn't help but muttered to themselves. We've run into an iron wall. Oh, our dear leaders. Oh, dear leaders of the 3 holy lands. Why didn't you think this through? This is a man who defies nature itself. He's a man who commands such terrifying strength. And you've sent us to capture this man? I had warned the Silver Blizzard City that day. And they've been very obedient ever since. No one has arrived here for a very long time. And they've only expressed their gentle greetings if they've ever come around. The black-robed man spoke cynically in a dull voice. But it seems that the people from the 3 holy lands are a bit different. Not only did they come here, they did so with a great momentum. They've even turned this place into such a chaotic mess. It seems that you would have destroyed the entire Jun family if this old man hadn't showed up. Moreover, it seems that countless innocent people would have died tragically in order to fulfill your so-called purpose of welfare of the common people and protection of the future of our continent. This old man isn't very happy about this. He slowly lifted his eyes, and two cold rays of light flashed through his eyes. Then, he continued, this old man isn't very happy about this. Killing one Li Ju Tian wasn't difficult by any means. Do you think that killing several Li Ju Tians is going to be difficult for me? This story will be continued to chapter 561. For those of you who are not subscribed yet, please subscribe. The interesting and best stories will be updated. See you again in the next episode.